into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer.
Of great stress in the Middle East and the Gulf regions. And it is my fervent prayer that we use this blessed month of Ramadan to pray for peace to reign and for the guns to be silenced in this region. We also ask that this holy month of Ramadan will lead to a cessation and a de-escalation of the ongoing conflict. Your Excellencies, the presence of the diplomatic corps this evening is a very significant reminder of the strong bonds of friendship, mutual respect, and constructive engagement that exists between our country and the larger international community. At a time when the world faces complex challenges, from conflict and insecurity to economic and humanitarian pressures, occasions such as this reaffirm the importance of dialogue, of partnership, and of mutual cooperation. I wish to extend heartfelt recognition to our coordinating directors, ambassadors, and directors of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, whose unwavering dedication and exemplary leadership have been pivotal in advancing Ghana's diplomacy. A diplomatic trademark of peace, mutual respect, friends of all, enemies to none, which really must be the blueprint for all other nations. The success of this evening's gathering stands as a testament to our collective effort. The effort towards entrenching inclusivity and religious tolerance. I wish at this juncture to acknowledge the office of the National Chief Imam for their invaluable role in not only supporting this iftar, but also fostering national unity, promoting interfaith harmony, and guiding our nation in the spirit of tolerance and peaceful coexistence. It is our hope that the spirit of Ramadan will continue to inspire us to work together in building bridges of understanding and advancing.
I feel so as empire war. I'm saying, "Ra, young crofoni be bano." Almost say, "Almost do a chairman from our almost fro pantoon no." I'm saying, "Pantoon no engine back up in the year juma," and you say, "Engine no, a gym semu free," and I ensure and I depend to equate. You say, "Fishermen, a deal more canoes near more outboard motors, got train pantoon no buy." They say, "Auntie." Michelle Mobo abra ye campaign na eyeme ahoho a eyeme anije se me ka kire mo se contractor me kan ye no ye de ama contractor no enche bia mo behu se contractor beba obesi ni si afia etwemu a ekyese eduane bebu ya ekrafo bebre aboka ninti fertilizer ya kra se afiwei ye de bema ekrafo normally ye the ma omo at subsidized price ye teso na omotua kakra And so near see any a crafo baby abocano. Makacha Minister of Agriculture say fertilizer no on farmer a crafo no free of charge.
Today we signed the Ghana European Union Security and Defense Partnership. The United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Norway, and others have signed this partnership with the EU, and Ghana is the first African country to join them. This demonstrates the strengthening collaboration between Ghana and the European Union in tackling evolving security challenges, especially in our sub-region and across the Sahel. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, complex security threats and risks continue to emerge and evolve across West Africa. The recent tragic incident involving Ghanaian traders who lost their lives in Burkina Faso serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of insecurity. In the face of these challenges, partnerships like the one we celebrate today are essential and show the importance of strong regional cooperation and coordination to protect lives and maintain peace and stability across West Africa. These buses will be deployed to support night operations, shift workers, and late-night economic activity in our urban areas. Safety will be prioritized, and routes will be designed around demand data and feedback. The public deserves our respect. Please serve the public with courtesy and efficiency. The government will continue to invest in public transport, which is an investment in all our sectors: productivity, safety, and social equity. When investment is matched with discipline, accountability, and a culture of service and maintenance, the returns are very high. When our transport system is efficient, people, goods, and services move as they should. That is why enhancing public transport is central to our economy. Our aim is to decrease dependence on unreliable, unsafe, and overly expensive transport options. These buses will increase carrying capacity, extend service to more communities, reduce pressure on commuters, and provide them with a more dignified experience.
The Faculty of Law at the University of Cape Coast turned into a center for deep historical and legal reflection as students and lecturers gathered for a public lecture by veteran journalist and staunch Pan-Africanist Kwesi Pratt Jr. The lecture focused on his latest book, Reparations, History, Struggle, Politics and Law, which examines the historical injustices of slavery and colonialism and Africa's quest for reparatory justice. According to the faculty, the engagement was inspired by renewed international decisions on reparations after President John Dramani Mahama championed calls for justice for Africa on the global stage. The discussions explored the legal, political, and economic implications of reparations and how Africa can leverage international law and diplomacy to seek redress for centuries of exploitation.
25th, I think, March 25th or 28th, something very significant happened to the world. And it is that all of the CARICOM countries and all 55 African states agreed to table a resolution before the UN General Assembly. we've been divided. 1963, when Nkrumah proposed the unity of African states, we were divided between the Casablanca group and the Monrovia group and so on, and we argued and argued and argued, and even until now, we have not been able to secure African unity. But a few months ago, all our countries in Africa, in spite of the leaders we have, and you know the leaders we have, it includes Tinubu and the others, we managed to agree that when it comes to reparative justice, we should speak with one voice. And it was not just Africa. The CARICOM states also agreed. So jointly sponsored by Africa and the CARICOM states, we tabled a resolution before the UN General Assembly, which saw the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity. And we got that resolution passed. For me, that was a very important moment in our history as black people. Very, very important moment in our history as Africans. It demonstrated that we can come together. And indeed, without our coming together, without our unity, we'll forever be in this mess. Only a couple of months ago, we showed that we can overcome our differences. And for me, that was even far more important than the resolution which was passed. But the tabling of that resolution and the debate which arose from it are important and significant.
The Pan-Africanists further urged young legal minds to study the historical roots of inequality and contribute meaningfully to the continental struggle for justice and economic transformation.
You see, the struggle for reparative justice is not easy. It's very complex. Because a lot of times, it calls upon us to break out of our comfort zones, and it is not easy. We've been educated to think a certain way, and breaking away from that is very difficult. And because it's so difficult, we get entrapped by the enemy, and we work against ourselves. And one of the things that I've heard, which is most surprising, is the claim that our ancestors sold us into slavery. There is no historical basis for that claim. Let us assume that it is true. Our ancestors sold us. Let's assume that it is true. How come that today all the proceeds of the crime are found in Europe and not in Africa? How come? So that if you participated in it, and we were cheated out of the proceeds, we still have a right to fight for the proceeds, don't we? If we went into an agreement to commit crimes, and proceeds came out of the crimes, and all the proceeds got deposited in Europe and not Africa, it is still a case for reparation. So that is an argument we should not tolerate at all. It has no basis. In any case, today, the Europeans tell us about what they call artifacts. Artifacts, stolen artifacts, and so on. Examine it. What are these artifacts? Some of them are skulls. Whose skulls are those? Those are the skulls of our heroes. Those who fought against the transatlantic slave trade. They killed them and took their skulls to their museums to display. You know, I fully agree that this subject has legal complications. It has. Even for some of the most educated lawyers and so on, they admit that there are legal complications. But what should we do? Don't include me, I'm not learned. But what should you do as learned people and as students of law and so on? You need to come together and to find the legal mechanism.
He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to the studios of Pan-African Television. We're broadcasting live from Abelengbe. We are also live on Radio Gold 90.5 FM. Don't forget, we are live on social media, 2 platforms specifically. We are live on YouTube. Look for the page Pan-African Television. And on Facebook, look for Pan-African Television. You get to watch us live. Both of them provide an opportunity for you to comment, because they have a comment section that you can use. Share your thoughts with us on the discussions we'll be having today. This morning, last week, I was not here. It was Justice that hosted the show. And as I listened to the discussion, 2 things came to mind. One, when you were growing up, how your mother felt when she was of the opinion that you had disgraced or shamed her before a stranger. The beatings you got. The second one was also the issue of a famous Akanakam proverb that says that if you're cutting the path, you're most likely not to know whether what you have done or the path behind you is crooked. So it takes someone to tell you that you're getting this wrong. Those 2 thoughts came to mind because I was surprised at what happened in the case of Kenya when the France-Africa Summit was ongoing and they wouldn't allow protests, and there was a huge suppression of the protesters who turned up on that day. Well, we'll be talking about that again because this time around we have, as part of our panel, a man who I will later see in a video at the front of the protest that happened in Kenya against the African France Summit. Of course, France has been trying to find a route back into Africa to continue to maintain its stranglehold on the French-speaking countries. So we're discussing that in our very first discussion. And then we'll move on to a discussion on xenophobia. We've done that on many occasions. This week, Ghana's Foreign Affairs Ministry had announced that they will be evacuating some 300 Ghanaians back to Ghana from South Africa. It did not happen because they said the numbers had swelled to 800. And this time around, they needed to do a lot more because the South African authorities were asking them to go through certain legal processes before they will be able to do that. Al Jazeera asked a simple question today: why it is the case that there's a growing anti-immigrant sentiment in South Africa, especially if you are African. And we'll conclude today's discussions with Ghana's exit from the IMF or stay, because we'll be enrolling onto a PCI, a policy coordination instrument. Essentially, there'll be the same conditions, there'll be the same reviews that happen every 6 months, and there'll be demands made of us. One of which we've been discussing, because there's a proposal from the IMF that we should reconsider our decision not to privatize our biggest electricity distributor, the Electricity Company of Ghana, to make it much more efficient. That's the proposal from the IMF. The government has indicated we will not do that, but we will do something. Anyway, so those are the issues we'll be discussing this morning. And thank you very much for making time to join us. A big thank you to our partner stations across the country who are currently tuning to us. Now, in the studio this morning to discuss the issues, and I'll start from our regular. Kwame Kwesi Jr. is General Secretary of the Socialist Movement of Ghana. Of course, nice to see him this morning because I didn't see him last week. And it's always wonderful to see him in the mornings. We also have Ninoy Hansen Norty, who's becoming a semi-regular on our panel nowadays. He is former member of parliament for Tema Central. Good morning to you. Yes. And Solomon Owusu, he never stops trending. Trending there, he will never stop trending. He's Director of Communications of the United Party. Nice to see you.
Nice to be here, Sena. Good morning to you, and my brother.
I left the best parts for the last because it takes some introducing. Anyway, Professor Vijay Prashad, the first time I had the opportunity of watching him speak, I think there was somewhere last year at the headquarters of the Socialist Movement of Ghana. It was quite a delight listening to you on that day. He is a distinguished academic and executive director of the Continental Institute of Social and Economic Research. He's a Marxist activist and a proud author of 40 books, and including his recently published The Revolutionary Thoughts of Kwame Nkrumah. He also serves on the Advisory Council of the International People's Assembly. He is currently visiting Ghana at the invitation, like the last time, of the Socialist Movement of Ghana. And we are proud to have him on the show today to be part of this discussion. Prof, good morning.
Thanks a lot. It's great to be with you. Thank you.
And it's nice to have you on the show.
Thanks.
Yeah. Rarely do you hear in Ghana somebody who's a professor and all you see is their first name and surname. The professor must come first. So I was surprised when I saw professor because I have seen Vijay Prashad. I didn't know.
We'll skip the professor part. It's okay.
The interesting part is that he always liked to call himself a journalist more than any of the other things that he does. Well, so nice to have you once again.
Thanks.
This time around, what are you doing with the Socialist Movement of Ghana?
Well, it's great to be here to get a sense of Ghana. I came here from Burkina Faso,
okay,
and I've been very interested in learning about the developments not only in the Sahel region but around the Sahel region. And Kwesi and I have been sort of looking into the militarization of Africa again.
Okay.
And I thought Kenya, Ouagadougou, Accra actually makes a kind of uncomfortable sense because, this is where the West is reasserting itself, okay, having been kicked out of the Sahel. So I'm here to, to chat with Kwesi and figure out how do we understand this.
Okay. That would be nice. That's nice. That's an interesting one. Anyway, well, we have to start today's discussion, and we are starting from something that he was part of. In fact, he was in front of the protest. When I asked him, he said he was reporting on it. A reporter in front. So that's quite interesting. So we'll start from there. And interestingly, I don't know if he understands the format. Our format is much more of a debate format. We lay out the topics and you say exactly what is on your mind on the issue of discussion. So this is something that meant a lot to you to the extent that you had to be there, you had to be part of the protest. So I want to hear first of all why you were there and exactly what happened, because everybody would like to know what happened. You were there. There will be different accounts of what happened. So give us an idea.
Well, I met the Kenyan police. That's exactly what happened. The Kenyan police decided, even though I was walking with my hands up in the air, that my knee was a threat to Kenyan society, and the police officer repeatedly smashed my knee with his rod, and then they fired tear gas at a very small number of people, arrested a group of people, threatened to deport some of the people who had come from outside Kenya, held them for almost 80 hours. That's what happened. And then the question comes, this was all happening while Emmanuel Macron was with about 30 leaders of African countries. And Emmanuel Macron in that gathering declares that we are the true Pan-Africanists, and African heads of government clapped for him. No hypocrisy, they clapped for him. I mean, I was telling Kwesi yesterday that these are not presidents and prime ministers. These are self-opening doors. These are keys in doors that open themselves. Macron doesn't even have to put his hand on the key on William Ruto and try to turn it. Ruto is turning himself and saying, please come in. You know, it's embarrassing that here comes a colonizer. Yeah, I mean, France is, after all, you know, continues to be a colonial power on the African continent, and has had a long history of ugly colonialism. Today, Burkina Faso has rural electricity at 9%. You can't blame that on the Burkinabe people. That goes back. That's a historical thing. You know, European colonialism, French colonialism simply didn't, as we say, develop these parts of the world. And now they think they've come to help these countries by militarizing the territory. I mean, let's be quite clear. You know, you mentioned the IMF as the third topic of discussion, but it's actually quite related to this. If France really wanted to help these African states, then cancel the debt. Stop demanding that these countries, which are actually countries with a lot of resources, but poor countries, stop demanding that they keep paying you back. You claim that they owe you billions of dollars, billions. You're holding their reserves in your treasury. You're not allowing them to create their own monetary policy. Stop all of that. Stop those games. These loans that many of these African states are paying off, these loans were taken by undemocratic governments. You know, governments that simply did not have the mandate of the people. In Burkina Faso, for instance, the government of Blaise Compaoré left Burkina Faso in 2014 with an enormous debt burden. Not all to the government of France or to French creditors, but to European and US credit markets, and then now to the Euro bond market. And so, why not just say, okay, Jubilee, you know, no more debt for you, let's cancel everything. In fact, if you had a Africa Forward or Africa Tomorrow Summit, that should be the primary announcement. If you're really a Pan-Africanist, if that's actually a legitimate thing, let's not laugh at him. Let's take him at his word. Emmanuel Macron comes to Nairobi, Kenya, announces we are all the real Pan-Africanists. What do you think the next sentence out of his mouth should be? Therefore, we want to have a military base on your territory. Should that be sentence 2? We should do a poll for the viewers. Should sentence 2 be, we want to have a military base on your territory? Or, we have decided to annul all debt, and it's part of a reparations package. We're just going to say no more debt. In fact, we're going to honor our climate financing obligations. We're going to provide infrastructural credits. We're going to provide even more credit to deal with things like health and education. That's a Pan-African project. I mean, imagine Kwame Nkrumah, one of the great Pan-Africanists. What was he saying? Let's have foreign military bases as part of a Pan-Africanist agenda. Was that Nkrumah's vision? Yeah, Neocolonialism, 1965. Kwame Nkrumah, Chapter 2. Let's have foreign military bases. That's part of a No, of course not. In Neocolonialism, Nkrumah explicitly says, no foreign military bases on our soil. And interestingly, and here's the funny part of it, the African Union in 2016 passed a resolution saying let's not have foreign military bases on African soil. That was the Peace and Security Council of the African Union. Kenya is a member of the African Union. Ghana is a member of the African Union. Why does Kenya have foreign military bases? Nigeria is a member of the African Union. Why is Nigeria allowing the United States to build a military base in the north? Why is it that when I landed from Ouagadougou to Accra, the first thing I see when we are taxiing to the terminal is a giant US Navy transport plane sitting at the edge of the tarmac, and then there was a plane entirely black, no markings at all, sitting right next to it. What are they doing here? I mean, how is this possible that now concepts like Pan-Africanism are so poorly corrupted that you allow people like Macron or Keir Starmer or Donald Trump to say, well, you know, for your development, we are going to provide a military base. I mean, is that really logical? And do the African people accept that Pan-Africanism equals foreign military base and that development happens through foreign military base? It's a question for you, really. You know, do you think the African public agrees with that?
That's an interesting question. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And laying the foundation there. So you understand why he was in Kenya, to be part of those protests. Just a reminder to our leaders that be consistent. You just went to do the reparation thing. You're back here, you're having this kind of discussions. Anyway, but let's listen to Solomon Owusu next.
Good morning and good morning to Prof. Prof, welcome to Ghana. And then I'm sure you enjoy the Ghanaian hospitality in the able hands of Comrade Pratt, who is our captain. And to my brother Ninoy, I don't know whether you'll be going back to Parliament, but if you will, I will suggest you contest on the ticket of the United Party and win handsomely. And to your cherished viewers, you see, I am not surprised, because I keep telling you and I keep saying that the only reason why the Sahelian region will not survive what the Traore, the Gauta and the rest are doing will be from within, that is within Africa. They are not safe because of African leaders. Not that the people really do not want or like what you're doing, because every human being wants development. But most of the leaders we have on the continent now are sellouts. They are not people that you could trust. And it's the reason why Macron is emboldened. You are even fortunate that this time around the summit is taking place on the African continent. Remember, in the previous two events, he sat in Paris and invited all these elderly men who could father him, and they all bought a flight and went to France. So if this time around he has decided to come to your soil, then you must consider it as an improvement in the situation. Why would anybody on the African, remember, France is meeting the entire African continent, made up of a population close to 1.6 billion. What's France's population? That is 66 million. We are not even meeting the EU. Africa as a continent is not meeting another continent called the EU, which is about 700 million people. A single country within a continent is meeting the entire African continent. And our leaders decided to join, listen to him, make his case, kowtow to him, sell all of us out. So that is where the problem is. And in the end, I heard them saying that they were planning to, as it were, invest about $25 billion into technology and other stuff. That's an insult. Total insult. A continent that is worth trillions of dollars. We have everything. Why don't we have, Sena? Sometimes you sit back and say something fundamentally is wrong somewhere. We are not thinking right. Either than that, he wouldn't come. But he's doing all these to prepare the grounds to re-enter Burkina, to re-enter Mali, to re-enter Guinea, to re-enter Niger. And they'll be doing that through Nigeria. Recently, they came to tell you that together with the Nigerian army, they entered the Zambezi forest. I know it's not true. What will happen next is that they will tell you the rebels from that Zambezi forest have moved towards the Burkina side, and they will arm them to go and take over the country. That is precisely what they are doing. But we seem not to get a picture. We always sit back when it happens before we realize, oh, so this was the reason why they were doing all these things. It is the reason why, as a continent, we must begin to preach this borderless thing. We are disjointed. The youth of the continent, really, we don't know our bearing now. Nobody is trying to put us together. Nobody. The Ghanaian, you have no relationship with the Burkina youth. We don't have a common grounds. So we see their fights as an individual fight, as country specific. The Ghanaian youth does not see the problems in Togo as their problem. We brought upon ourselves what we call the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Something that could change the destiny of the continent. How well do we preach it? How well are we all domesticating it, putting it as part of our national agenda, each country? There is nothing. We have only set up an office where we pay staff. No realistic thing is happening. And so they have seen the lacuna and they are playing within it. France is struggling. Go and check the unemployment rate. The country is in trouble. The day Africa will redeem itself from the shackles of France, France is collapsed. They are gone. They were taking freely the uranium from Niger, while the people of Niger sleep in darkness, total darkness. But that uranium was powering electricity in France. But you see, we are behaving as though we can't do it on our own. That we forcibly need the European and the American. Sometimes I get worried that unless they come in, Africa cannot develop. But I keep telling you that there is a reason, or there was a reason why Africa, our forebears, got this part of the world. They were not dumb. They were very smart. They fought for the better part of the world, where every available mineral that will make a nation prosper is. It didn't come on a silver platter. They fought. They understood what they were doing. They wanted for us. But we have lost our bearings, so we are unable to function. You go to the Congo Basin area. Look at what is happening between Rwanda and the Congo. Deliberate. They have created that confusion there. So they will never come together. The AU is so toothless, they are unable to bring countries together. And that is why we are going through all this. So let's thank the lives of Prof that decided to demonstrate. But as for Ruto, Ruto is a sellout. I'm even surprised that you have left him, because you remember in 2024, they nearly took him out. The young ones wanted to show him power, that you were misleading us. But somehow, he managed to survive the whole thing. That would have been a beautiful spectacle, that the youth themselves realized on your own policies. They were taking him out for any reason, but they said your own policies, the tax reforms, the levels of inflation, what you yourself stood on platforms and promised them and were doing otherwise, they wanted to take you out based on it. Something that our parliaments are unable to do. That when someone stands on the podium and promise that given the opportunity, I will do A, B, C, D, and they get a chance and they are doing otherwise, what sort of measures do we take? Do our parliaments have what it takes to take them on? I don't think so. But the youth wanted to show us something. It is not late. We still have the opportunity, as we are doing by way of activism, to conscientize the people that we have whatever it takes to develop. We have relied on these people for so long. Our situation keeps deteriorating by the day. So what makes anybody think that they are our salvation? France. Before Macron went there, he should have been the first person to apologize to the entire continent, their role in, as it were, causing the deficit in development. I moved from here to Togo, I am unable to communicate. Just from here to Togo, the person is speaking French, I'm speaking English. You will be standing there, this one is looking at you, are looking at him. Nothing is happening. Deliberate. Meanwhile, they are brothers. The people of Burkina, they are brothers. Those in Ivory Coast, they are brothers. Yet we see ourselves as enemies. Because that is what we have been told to do. Look, on a simple matter of cocoa, Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire produce about 2/3 of the world's cocoa output. Yet, prices of cocoa are determined by people who hardly plant cocoa trees. I can't imagine that you that controls the supply of a product, you can't demand the prices of it. Why does it happen? But because of the confusion they have set between Ghana in Ivory Coast. The French is still having a toe or hold of the Ivorian economy, so that when we are supposed to agree on have a common grounds, they are listening to the French. So no progress is made. Ghana is on its own, Ivory Coast is on its own. But if we were to team up and work together, we will make a headway. So, Sena, we have to just preach, thinking that one day we'll get the right set of leaders who will look inwards, who will think that we have capable men and women on the continent to deal with our problems so that we prosper. I'll end it here.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, if you just join us, you're still watching the Mother World talk shows, Alhaji and Alhaji, live on Pan-African television. We're also live on Radio Gold. We are live on many other affiliate stations across the country. Big thank you to all of them. Well, if you just join, you miss Professor Vijay Prasad's story on his encounter with the Kenyan police. Perhaps they should have, if we were holding cameras or this, maybe they would have been a bit more merciful. He said they targeted his knee. I don't know why they decided that the knee was the place to go for. But it was quite interesting because what they were doing was to draw attention of the African leaders to something that they might have been missing on that day. Why are you sitting in a room with a colonizer after you've gone to win a battle for reparations? Well, but they didn't see it that way. All they saw were people that they needed to beat. Anyway, let's hear from Ninoy. Ninoy has been around Africa, maybe as much as Comrade Pratt, but he's also been in many other spaces when it comes to the economy of the world. Let's listen to him.
Good morning, Sena, and good morning to our panelists. You are most welcome to Ghana. Professor Vijay Prasad. I was trying to do a little bit of reading on him to understand him much better, and I realized that he's a Bengali from Calcutta.
Yes.
You know, I also grew up in that area. So today I'm going to attempt to speak a bit of Bengali, if I could still remember a bit of it. Anyway, Kebonacho. Kane apneke shatogam. Correct? I got it right?
Yes,
yes, I got it right.
Bravo.
Yes. So my Bengali is it's still there. It's a bit rusty, but it's still there. I actually did my O-levels in Bangladesh.
Ah, okay.
So, and Calcutta and Bangladesh, they're all Bengali people. In fact, they suffer the same problems that we suffer.
Exactly.
One people that have been divided by colonial borders and structures that they are still trying to deal with. Anyway, back to our subject matter. You are most welcome to Ghana. Back to our subject matter. You know what France created? France had a policy called France Afrique, French Africa. And that policy, in fact, if you try to delve into that policy quite well, it was also an apartheid system where they created a black French elite. Okay, so when you went to places like Côte d'Ivoire, you had a French elite who were black Africans who went to school in St. Louis and other places, who were trained as Europeans to govern and manage the rest of black Africa. So you would have an Ivorian who goes to work on Monday to Thursday, Friday, flies to Paris to see his family, and comes back on Sunday night and comes back to work in Côte d'Ivoire. That was the structure. Unfortunately or fortunately, I have family on the Ivory Coast side through my mother's side, the Nzima side. And some of my uncles were in that system. Let me put it that way. So they were French people lording over the rest of the Africans, but they were black African people. That's the structure that people like Fofo Boigny and co came through. And it was so bad that you'll be walking on the streets of Abidjan, they stop you and ask you for your papers. They call it Pierre or some PS or something like that. They used to ask you for the papers. And if you don't have it, you go and spend a night in jail. And this was, in fact, in my own lifetime, somewhere 1997, 98, almost every vacation, I was there. And I saw it every day. And they were arresting the guys from the north. So when they see somebody from Korogo or even Bouaké, who could maybe not speak French the way they spoke in Abidjan, he would spend the night in jail. Yes, that's how bad it was. And I'm sure Uncle Kwesi used to travel to that place, so he will be able to testify to that. This was the reality of the France-Afrique policy. It was a colonialist apartheid structure built by French people and using black people to run their affairs. So you see your fellow black man who is maybe an Nzma man or an Anyi man who speaks French better than a Frenchman. That is the reality. I mean, I think there was a French president, one of our African presidents, I think Senegal, one of the presidents of Senegal, who actually boasted in the French parliament that I speak better French than you. You know, and that is how the pride that he took in being more European in a black skin than his own people. So this is the reality of the France-Afrique policy. And that France-Afrique policy was very deep. Very, 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 very deep. It was not superficial. Unlike the British kind of colonialism, which was a business affair, this one was more of like re-institutionalizing or redefining the people. In fact, destroying who they are to create what France wanted them to be. And I saw a video recently of a parade that was held in France somewhere in, I think, 1945, post-Second World War, where they put black soldiers from West Africa on display to prove to the world that they have been able to change them or evolve them from, I don't know the words to use, but evolve them from primitive people to modern men in a display, in a trade fair. So this is the reality, and this was the reality, and this is the mindset of the France-Afrique project. And almost every African leader that you find between 1945 to maybe until recently, maybe in even this 2000s or 2010s, was either selected or promoted or appointed by the French government, especially in the French-speaking countries. When you go to a meeting with them, an official meeting with them, they would have to make a phone call to their bosses in France to agree before they can take a decision. In the middle of the meeting, they will take a break and call back to their bosses' offices in Paris and get back to you. Even phone calls were routed through France. Every phone call that was made from Africa, from a French-speaking country, had to go through France to come back to Africa. That's how deep the policy was. It was a policy of assimilation. So they were assimilating them into the French culture. So, and in fact, all the conflicts that you see in West Africa, especially French-speaking West Africa, boils down to this apartheid system, the issues we had in Cote d'Ivoire, when the people in the northern part of Cote d'Ivoire decided to go after the people in the south or fight the people in the south. It was because of some of these things. Because they didn't feel part and parcel of the state called Ivory Coast. This is the reality. It was the same thing in Togo. They put Yadema there and they brought his son. The same thing happened in Niger. They put Debi there, they brought his son. Mobutu, he was taken out, Kabila came, Kabila was killed, his son took over. There's no president in Africa today, in French-speaking Africa today, who does not pay homage to France. In fact, today, there's a French president that has visited jail, Sarkozy, because his funding for his campaign came from African leaders. Gabon was one of the biggest sponsors of French politics. This is the reality. Okay, so African states in their nature are European creations. They are European creations. They are not sovereign. And unfortunately, we don't bear the tenets of sovereignty. So African states are not able to turn African desires or aspirations into reality. They're very artificial states. Very, very artificial. It's just on paper. In fact, half of our French-speaking countries have political leaders who have all served in the French army. All of them, from Yadema to the guy in Guinea now, they were all part of the French military. They were all part of the French, French Legion. It's a mercenary army that anybody can join. Even if you're a criminal from Ghana and you go there and you enter the door, they will take you in. They call them the White Kapi. That's what they are called. Yeah, it's a mercenary army. And many of our leaders, Yadema was a member. All of them have served in that institution. And therefore, they are just white men in black skins. So they don't have any attachment, or maybe, let me use the word, even love, what we call a we feeling towards their people. They don't. So they can plunder, they can loot, they can sit with them and share the booty. That is what France is trying to extend into Anglophone Africa or English-speaking Africa. That's what they are trying to extend. And they are looking for puppets that they can work with and use them as tools to engage our people or bring them into their space. And unfortunately, Ruto is one of them. He's like a super puppet for the Americans and for them, and for the Israelis, everybody. He is the puppet. He does their bidding. They found a nice way of finding something against him that they can use against him in the future. So he does their bidding. That's all. Maybe that one we don't know. But he's doing the bidding, and we can see the bidding being done. 90% of the conflicts in Africa, in the Sahel region, let's use the Sahel region, from Senegal all the way to Djibouti. In fact, France had bases in all these countries. Senegal, Mali, Niger, Chad, all the way to Djibouti. So end to end of Africa. France had bases there. There are islands in Africa where France has shared the countries into two. Comoros. They've shared the people into two. The one portion is African, and the other half is a French colony. Reunion is part of Africa. It's in fact between Madagascar and South Africa. It is closer to Africa than even any other part of the world. But the French have taken over and have made it part of, it's a district of France. So these are the real challenges that Africa faces. The terrorist activities that are happening in our region, they fund them and then now turn around to come and tell you that we want to quell the fire. There are videos, I've seen videos on some social media platforms where you see foreign mercenaries with helicopters from certain countries dropping arms to rebels in Nigeria, Boko Haram, dropping arms to rebels in Mali. How is the MNLA raising funds? How are they finding? They have, MNLA has an office in France, in Paris. They have an office there, an operational office. Who is hosting them? So these are the realities. But African states in their artificial state, in their artificial nature, do not have the capacity to fight on their own. We have to admit to that one. Unless we come together. But the problem is, are we coming together on the back of these artificial states? That's a very big question that we as a people must answer. India answered that in the 1960s. I keep telling you about Sardar Patel, who led India's union and put it together. He answered that question for India. And India now created states along the ethno-linguistic lines within the state, within the territorial boundaries of India. Today, India can easily integrate with Bangladesh. They share the same political structures. Same. They have a Westminster-style system. They can integrate. They can even integrate with Pakistan if they need to. They can coexist and live together. They can integrate with Nepal. So they have solved that problem. We have not even solved the basic problem of state creation and state development. So these are the realities of African states. Look, even if it comes to financing projects, under the France-Afrique policy, French companies have priority over any other company in these countries. DRC, same thing. The French companies have absolute control. Look at Total. Total is all over the place. Total Energies. They used to be ELF. Go and read about the history of ELF, what they used ELF for in Africa. They used ELF to assassinate some of our leaders. They used ELF to plunder some of our resources. When they realized that ELF was getting a bad name, a small company called Total, that was like a one-box office, bought it's like a shrimp swallowing a whale. The shrimp bought the whale. No finances on its books, nothing. And overnight it became what it is. So this is the reality of Africa. But I always keep saying that we, just as my brother said, we have a responsibility as young leaders to take the mantle and let the people know the truth and sell the story to them and get them to understand and follow us and buy into the idea. Because it's not going to happen on a silver platter. It's going to cost us blood, sweat, and tears. And we should be prepared to fight for it. Algeria was one of the biggest French colonies in the world. Jacques Chirac was born in Algeria. He fought in Algeria. But the Algerians said, no, enough is enough. Go home. Even the group I was talking about, MNLA, the Tuareg people, they may have a legitimate right for self-determination, you know, because they have been fighting for that independence, not under just Mali. Even before that, under the French colonial rule, they fought and fought and fought and fought and said, no, we can be under this entity, but we want to take care of ourselves and maintain us, because they have their own language, their own culture, their own sense of belonging, and all that. And for that reason, I have some sympathies towards them, you know. But it can be resolved on the table. But what is happening today is that France is funding it. They are terrorist leaders that have been captured in Niger, who are French Legion members. One, I missed the names. I'll get the names in the future and send it to you. He was arrested and caught by the local guys, kept locked somewhere in the desert, and he was a Legion fighter. He was a PA to their commanding officer. How did he find himself in Africa and doing all the kind of things he was doing? So France is coming back into Africa to plunder. To wait, if you don't fear death, take a look at sleep, correct? Something like that, or take you from sleep. We have lived with these people for the last 200 years or 300 years. Africa has gone through what will be described as almost a millennia of the Chinese call it a century of humiliation. Ours may be almost a millennia of humiliation. Living and working with France. So, if you don't fear death, look at sleep. And ask yourself whether it's worth it bringing France back onto the table and making him a partner. And I side with what my brother said. We have to take the bull by the horn and build Africa on our own. Like the Indians have done. Like the Chinese have done. Like the Asians have done. And I always take you from them. Like the Koreans have done. Japan after Second World War. Africa coming together is not difficult. But even if you look at the current African Union structure we have, it cannot give us that unity that we are looking for. The last time I spoke about it, that I think it's Article 3, that talks about us keeping sovereignty, keeping the sovereignty, the so-called sovereignty, and keeping the so-called borders, and keeping the so-called structures of the state as they are. I'm just paraphrasing. But if you are to go by that, Africa is never going to unite. Africa is never going to unite. So sometimes when we send policy, when policy makers are making policy, we should read the fine lines in between, the fine print. Because I'm sure people sat there and agreed to this. Why did they agree to it? Maybe it was put on the table and said, look, go ahead and agree to this and we'll give you $100 million each to go and take care of some things in your country. Yet, that $100 million is, the cost of signing that document is much more than that $100 million. Today, the EU and these European countries are finding ways of nipping Africa apart with trade rules. Trying to use trade as a tool to divide us. They'll give you some preferential treatments on one product and give your brother another preferential treatment on another product, and therefore you are forced to just sell this product to them and he's selling that to them, and you cannot work with each other. The trade between Africans is less than 2% of our global trade. To travel from here to a place like Guinea-Bissau, you might have to travel to Europe, to Portugal, before you come back into Africa. So we have deep problems. The time may not give us the opportunity to exhaust everything, but to summarize, our relationship with France has not been the best in the last 500 years. And I don't think that Macron saying that he's a more Pan-Africanist than us should make us happy. In fact, he was being very sarcastic, telling us that he's a Pan-Africanist. Trying to tell us that you guys are in quotes, foolish. and that I'm also a black man like you. Well, we know that he's not a black man. Well, we know that he hasn't got us at heart. That Macron is under no illusion and under no circumstances going to make Africa better than France. Africans must rise up and take the bull by the horn and change the narrative for our own people. And I believe that is possible. When we have the right leaders, we can support the right leaders, we can promote the right leaders with funding, support, resources. When we unearth them, we push them and demand from them, because when they're up there, trust me, when they're up there, sometimes the narrative may be different because they put you in a very cozy position. I'm so surprised at what is happening in Senegal today. Faye and Songo. Today, Faye has dismissed Songo. Last night, he just dismissed him as Prime Minister. Yeah. These are two people who work together that the youth of Africa supported. When Songo was in jail, he said, Faye, take over. We all know Songo as the leader. He says, take over. Win the elections. You've won the elections, and he's gone rogue. They cannot account for $7 billion, according to the IMF, in their budgeting. $7 billion. I don't think Macky Sall even did that. So we also have to police them, and we also have to make sure that we get the right, let me say, value for money, or value for the sweat, tears, and blood that Africans are sacrificing for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. And it was that policing that the Kenyans were trying to do that resulted in what we saw on the streets of Nairobi in the lead up to that France Forward summit. Well, we're just discussing that the implications for does France want a Pan-Africanist Africa? That's the question that everybody should be asking. When a French leader tells you, does France want a united Africa working together? Simple question. When he says, I'm a Pan-Africanist. Well, before I will listen to Kwame Kwesi-Pratt, there's someone, okay, so I think Nino was talking about, okay, this is Issa Adams, who says it was not a Senegalese president who boasted that he could speak French better than the French. He said he was a philosopher from, Martinique, called, Aimé Césaire, who says, I am the black man who teaches the French, their language. And he said, when I speak, they keep quiet and listen to me. And when they speak, I correct them. That was his quote. He was given 48 hours to leave France, and he died under very suspicious circumstances. It looked more like an assassination. That's Issa Adams who sent that. Thank you. Well,
just to say that if you're going to mention Aimé Césaire, he was one of the great anti-colonial writers, and I recommend everybody read his Discourse on Colonialism, published in the 1940s, which is the strongest case for thinking about colonialism at a time when the violence in Europe had made Europeans think that, oh my God, our lives have been so badly disrupted. And Césaire says, you think the Holocaust was bad? We experienced the Holocaust for hundreds of years.
Thank you. Thank you. By the way, how good was his Bengali?
His Bengali was very good, but his Fanonism was actually very good. His Fanonist commentary was excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof.
Another great Martinican, yes, Frantz Fanon.
Yeah.
Well, let's listen to you. Mr. Pratt?
Well, I mean, I'm always in shock when I watch and listen to the current leaders of Africa. It is clear that the current leaders of Africa have no respect for history. In fact, history is not part of their frame. And it is clear that the current leaders of Africa indeed style themselves as house niggers. They style themselves as house niggers and they play the role of house niggers. You see, our relationship with Europe, with France, with Britain, with Germany, Holland, Portugal, and so on, is a relationship which has lasted hundreds of years. I mean, I was in primary school when I was taught about the arrival on the shores of Elmina of Don Diego de Zambuja, and how this Portuguese sailor met Kofi Ansa, who then was the chief of Elmina. And I've read the diaries of Don Diego de Zambuja, and it is revealing. Don Diego de Zambuja actually confesses that the gold mine he saw in Elmina on first contact was one of the most advanced gold mines in the world. He described the city of Elmina with paved roads and so on. And he was so astonished that the people of Elmina actually had built a city which was far, far superior in terms of its environmental protection, in terms of its industry and so on, than Lisbon. This is Don Diego de Zambuja. Now, years after the first contact, Elmina had been completely destroyed, and a castle had been built in Elmina for transporting Africans to go to the Americas and Europe as beasts of burden. Our leaders don't know this. And even if they know this, they cannot relate to this as a product of our encounter with Europe. On March 26th, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution which classified the transatlantic slave trade as a crime against humanity. And all of us jubilated. I was jubilant, you understand? Yeah. One, because for the first time, and this is the first time, that all 55 African countries agreed on something. All of them, 55 African countries agreed on something. But more than that, the CARICOM states joined 55 African countries. This is a momentous occasion. I mean, if we can drive this unity, what can't we achieve? The unity of Africa and the Caribbean. When we came together, nobody could stop us in the UN General Assembly. We could use that in the attempt to reform the WTO. We could use that to reform the IMF. We could use that to reform the very United Nations. So it was a moment of pleasure. It was a moment of elation and so on. But our African leaders spoiled all. They spoiled it all. How did they spoil it? Whilst we were busy jubilating at the passage of this resolution, some of our leaders were busily signing a defense cooperation agreement with the European Union, which made complete nonsense of our achievements in the United Nations General Assembly. Whilst we were at it, some of our leaders were lying prostrate before the technocrats and officials of the IMF and the World Bank, who essentially have a responsibility to preserve the world order which was built on the back of slavery, was built on the back of colonialism, and was built on the back of today's neocolonialism. These are our leaders. And indeed, what happened in Kenya is a continuation of this absolute reckless madness. That's what happened in Kenya. What happened in Kenya is that our leaders met. In fact, our leaders were invited by the French president to an African capital to re-surrender to the dictates of the European Empire. And that's what they did. But you see, a friend of mine told me a story that I found most interesting. He said, why are you worried? This is not the most disgraceful behavior of African leaders. And that there are other behaviors which are most reprehensible. And he told me the story of a US president arriving somewhere in Senegal. And I remember that story very well. I'm sure, Nino, you would remember that story. And the US embassy in Accra actually issued a statement which said African leaders wanting a photo opportunity with the US president should fly to Senegal. And African leaders flew to Senegal for a photo opportunity with the US president. I mean, what can be more embarrassing than this? So Kenya is horrible. What happened in Kenya is horrible and so on. But there are other practices of our leaders which are even more horrible. Now, what has happened in Kenya? What has happened in Kenya is the direct result of African outrage, which is expressed in the breakout of the patriotic revolution in the Sahel. France is panicking. France is beginning to realize that, look, a stranglehold on the African economy, on African life and so on, is being broken in the alliance of Sahel state led by Captain Touare of Burkina Faso. Their first reaction was to call West African leaders and to tell them that, look, we want you to go to Niger to attack the new government in Niger, overthrow it, so that we can come back and re-establish ourselves as the true government of Niger. And France said, we will pay you $20 million to go and fight your own people. And France said, we will pay you $20 million to go and kill your soldiers and destroy infrastructure and so on. And amazingly, the West African leaders agreed.
I went to sit in Abuja.
For $20 million. These are West African leaders who are sitting on uranium. They are sitting on lithium. They are sitting on gold. They are sitting on huge quantities of diamonds and so on. Accepted $20 million from France to go and kill their soldiers and so on. But you see, this also taught us an important lesson. We stopped them. We stopped them through mass mobilization across the sub-region. So in the end, the federal parliament in Nigeria voted against the move to wage war against Niger. Indeed, the bordering Nigerian states bordering Niger, decided that they would not allow their territory to be used against, the regime and people in Niger. We won a victory. Okay. Now, why was France determined to pay West African leaders $20 million to go and kill their soldiers, to kill their own citizens, and so on? You see, before the outbreak of the patriotic revolution in the Sahel states, Niger was classified as the poorest country in the world. Indeed, some said that it was one of 3 poorest countries in the world. 2 years after the outbreak of the patriotic revolution, Niger became the fastest growing economy in the world. What does that say? 2 years after the patriotic revolution was unleashed, Niger became the fastest growing economy in the world. From a state of the poorest country in the world to a state of the fastest growing economy in the world. Now, instead of these bankrupt West African leaders asking the important question, how did they do it? So that they can learn lessons, they wanted to go and destroy the experiment. I mean, what other definition of barbarism can you get? I mean, if there's a definition of barbarism, this is it. Barbarians. Barbarians. The barbarians hate progress. You understand? They hate civilization. They destroy it and so on. So our leaders were essentially behaving like barbarians. Look, anybody who has visited France, you don't even have to visit France. Just watch television. See the movies. See the videos. France is perhaps the most lighted country in the world. Look at Paris. All the lights, the neon lights and so on. Where does it come from? The uranium used to power lighting in France. Huh? A lot of it came from Niger. And yet Niger, under France control, could not guarantee even 20% electrification for its people. This is the problem. This is the problem we are confronted with as Africans. You understand? Now, sometimes I like to tell the story of La Côte d'Ivoire. And my brother here has told part of the story. Part of the story is that at independence, the president of La Côte d'Ivoire, President Houphouët-Boigny, was a French citizen. Not just that, he was a member of parliament in France. You understand? So he presided over La Côte d'Ivoire as president, but was a member of parliament in France. And it is interesting that a deliberate competition was promoted between Ghana and La Côte d'Ivoire. Indeed, the French wanted to hold up La Côte d'Ivoire as a model of development. Okay? And were deeply worried by the progress which was being made by the Nkrumah government, its industrialization program, its electrification program, and so on. So, La Côte d'Ivoire became the model for neocolonial development, which they wanted to use in order to subvert the Nkrumah government. Okay? So today, if you look at Ghana, in spite of all the reverses we have suffered, in spite of the treacherous 1966 coup and so on, if you look at Ghana, even in its current state, and La Côte d'Ivoire, it should tell the African leaders a story. Because La Côte d'Ivoire was the model of neocolonial development. Look at where it is. What control do Ivorians have over their national economy?
Nothing.
La Côte d'Ivoire is still a producer of primary goods. Its largest export is raw cocoa beans and so on. So years of involvement in La Côte d'Ivoire and of upholding La Côte d'Ivoire as a model has not brought development to the people of La Côte d'Ivoire. And our leaders should have learned from this. Unfortunately, our electoral system does not produce leaders who are innovative, who are capable of thinking, and who stand up for our interests. And this is where we are. You see, in talking about the French and their influence in Africa, which they are struggling to maintain and so on, a review of the monetary system of former French colonies tells us a huge story. Now, what is that story? These former French colonies are compelled to keep their foreign reserves in the central bank of France. What are the implications? One of the implications is that when these former French colonies go to France and ask for loans, they are giving their own money as loans. They take their own money as loans and pay interest on their own money that they have borrowed from France. This is a ridiculous situation. This is a situation that should be completely unacceptable. Then we know of the story of African countries whose presidential palaces are housed in French government buildings and pay rent to France. I mean, how ridiculous and so on. Now, France is beginning to fear that it's going to lose this neocolonial control. It's looking for a way out, and it discovers Ruto. And this is a major discovery for France. There is another African leader who will lie down for Macron to walk on, who is ready to do the bidding of France, and so on. So they set up this conference, this summit, you know. And Ruto invites other African leaders to come and give him moral support in his betrayal of Africa. And these African leaders troop to Nairobi. Now, what is even more annoying is that they go there without money. Their airfares are paid for by the African taxpayer. Some of them went in private jets, fueled by the African taxpayer and so on. We pay for the cost of their betrayal of our interests. And they went there. And I'm sure that all of you saw the video of Macron acting as the slave master, cracking the whip on those who dared to speak out in the summit, and he called for their silence. I mean, there's so much noise about the freedom of speech and so on. It didn't happen in the summit. In Nairobi, Macron stood up and cracked the whip and called for silence. And the worst part of it is what my brother and comrade Vijay Prashad had described. Macron calls himself a Pan-Africanist, and African leaders clap for him. I mean, how can Africa unite when our leaders' understanding of Pan-Africanism leads to the conclusion that Macron is a Pan-Africanist? So we cannot depend on these leaders to move forward. We cannot depend on these leaders to harness our resources and to exploit these resources for the benefit of the African people. It is not possible. You understand? But another dimension of all of this is the small protest which is organized. I mean, that protest was so small it could have been ignored. I am not sure that that protest had 200 people in it. You know. And yet, the police reacted so violently, the Kenyan police reacted so violently, fired tear gas, fired bullets, arrested people, deported people, and so on. A small demonstration of less than 200 people. This was the reaction. Can you imagine if the Kenyan people en masse decide to protest against the neoliberal path that the Kenyan government is embarked upon? There will be mass murder. Of course, we saw what was described as the Gen Z revolution and how the Kenyan government reacted. Yeah. Clearly, if this is not fascism, what could be fascism? If this is not an abandonment of democratic principles, what can be? Let's say 200 people, 150 people on the streets protesting against the recolonization of Africa by France through the machine that Ruto has set out. And this is the reaction. Now, this reaction should teach us one thing. And this is an important lesson. that our struggle against neocolonialism, our struggle to control our own resources, our struggle to manage our own affairs, cannot and will not be realized under the bourgeois democratic order. Because the bourgeois democratic order pretends to be democratic. It is not democratic. It uses all the instruments of state to crush dissent, to crush protest, and we must be conscious of this in our organization and so on. You see, in the past few years, I've seen, I've heard, and I've felt many surprises, you understand? One of the things that I've seen, which has been totally shocking, is just what I'm about to describe. You see, when we got our independence from the British Empire, the British cleverly created the Commonwealth to create the impression, the illusion, that we are in a common cause. So, if you travel anywhere and everywhere, ambassadors in the Commonwealth states to Commonwealth countries are high commissioners, not ambassadors. Part of the illusion, part of the deception, and so on. It appeared that those of us who had been colonized by the British Empire had special rights and so on. It was a deception, you understand? So, there were many who started arguing that we need to get out of this Commonwealth. It doesn't serve our interests. It perpetrates the superiority of the empire, and the rest of us simply as satellites and so on. We were still in the middle of this, grappling with this reality of disguised enslavement and so on, when the president of the Republic of Ghana then, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, declared that in addition to being members of the Commonwealth, we will become members of the Francophonie.
Yes. And then Togo also joined Commonwealth.
Because the French had also created this contraption. They have created another Commonwealth which they call Francophonie to give the same illusion. Under President Akufo-Addo, we decided that British subjugation was not enough. We wanted more. So we added French subjugation by joining the Francophonie. And you know what is happening? After that, Togo decided that it would not allow the Akufo-Addo government to beat the Eyadema dynasty. So Togo also decided to join the British Commonwealth. Look, my brothers, don't laugh. It's not funny. Have you passed the Togo runabout, the cantonments runabout? Have you recognized that the signpost has changed?
Yes.
It used to be the Togo Embassy. It is now the Togo High Commission to Ghana.
Wow.
I mean, what is this? What is this? Something else is happening which is very, very significant, but which, you might not pay attention to. 2-3 years ago, I was at a public function in Accra. And some guy walks up to me. He looks every inch an African, in a black suit with black tie, looking all diplomatic and so on. And he came to me and he said, I am the French ambassador to Ghana. And I said, no, you are not the French ambassador to Ghana. You are the new Trojan horse. I said, why do you say that? I said, you are the new Trojan horse. You are here because you are African, you look African and so on. But we are not here to serve the interests of the African people. You are here as part of French deception. And I recall that when the Americans were organizing the 1966 coup, they sent a black person here as ambassador. Now, interestingly, this Trojan horse has left our shores, but has been replaced again by a black woman as French ambassador. These are deliberate. These are deliberate acts of deception, because the color of the skin of the ambassador does not change the policy. The color of the skin is part of the camouflage. And I ask my friends especially in the diaspora, in North America and so on, who are engaged in politics of color, who dwell on politics of color and so on, rather than politics of class and so on. And I ask them, Condoleezza Rice, was she white? Condoleezza Rice was not white. She was black. Exactly. But certainly, Condoleezza Rice could not serve my interests as an African when she was indeed in the UN Security Council acting on behalf of the United States of America. And I asked about Colin Powell, who was completely black, who was the defense secretary. He couldn't serve my interests because he was black and so on. So I think it's important for us to get over color politics and to focus attention on class politics. Because that is what brings everything into true relief. You understand? It brings everything into its true relief. You see, there's a phenomenon today which is referred to as the race to the bottom. What is that phenomenon? You know that Ghana has a lot of gold, South Africa has a lot of gold, Guinea has a lot of gold, I believe Liberia has gold, and so on. So all of this, gold multinationals operating from the colonial metropolis and so on, have devised a certain language and system. So, they go to South Africa and they tell the South Africans that, look, investment goes to places where the atmosphere is conducive and so on. So, they ask the South African government to do something. And they ask for tax holiday. So the South Africans then say, oh, no problem, we want your investment and therefore we are giving you 1 year tax holiday. They take the 1 year tax holiday, put it in their back pocket, and they go to Guinea. Say, look what the South Africans just did. They gave us 1 year tax holiday. If we can do better than the South Africans, we will direct our investments to Guinea. And Guinea says, oh, is that the case? We will give you 2 years tax holiday. They put the 2 years tax holiday in their back pocket, and then they fly to Mali. Look, South Africans gave us 1 year. The Guineans have done better. They've given us 2 years tax holiday. Malians say, don't worry, we give you 3 years tax holidays. And they go round and round and round, and they arrive at the Accra International Airport, and they are ushered into Jubilee House. What do you think will happen?
10 years. Straight.
Now, is this not the race to the bottom? We are racing to the bottom. Why are we racing to the bottom? We are racing to the bottom because we don't have a joint negotiation machinery. They are playing us against each other. The only way out is for Africans to negotiate with one voice and one strategy. Look, our leaders get invited to G7 meeting and they are so happy. They get invited to these conferences of the so-called industrialized countries and they are so happy and so on. Before these meetings, these G7 countries and so on plan, they have a strategy, they plan together. Even them, they plan together. They have a common strategy. The European Union acts on behalf of European capitalist states And they speak with one voice. But they invite Gambia to come and negotiate with them. And Gambia goes there thinking that it has been elected to go there because of its so-called democratic credentials and so on. It's happy to go there without consulting Ghana. It's happy to go there without consulting Togo and so on. And that is why we are not negotiating well. We haven't created the strength to negotiate well. Because how come that Africa with a population of 1.4 billion people, is weak when it comes to these negotiations? You see, last week I was reading some literature on the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I came across the fact that the Democratic Republic of the Congo is actually sitting on $74 trillion of wealth. Yeah. The coltan, the gold, and so on, the uranium, is valued at $74 trillion. Democratic Republic of Congo alone. And yet, 80% of its population cannot feed itself. This is the reality African leaders have to wake up to. This is the reality African leaders have to wake up to. I am amazed, and I think we'll come to that later, at this attitude of our leaders to sheepishly follow the prescriptions of the IMF and the World Bank. Sheepishly. Especially given the fact that if you take a country like Ghana, we have been to the IMF 18 times. And every time we go, our condition becomes worse. I remember 1983, when under the tutelage of the IMF and the World Bank, we began implementing what was then described as the Economic Recovery Program. And I saw the mayhem. Why? 300,000 workers lost their jobs. 300,000 workers lost their jobs. To do that, we had to attack trade union rights. By the end of 1986, more than 400 industrial enterprises and so on, created by the Nkrumah government, had been completely destroyed. They were wiped out. The only ones which have survived are what? It used to be called Golden Tulip Hotel. Now it's called Lancaster.
Yes.
And then Movenpick Ambassador and so on. Which other ones have survived? Which other ones have survived? But we were told that the private sector is the engine of development. And that privatization was meant to drive new life into our enterprises. So they have all collapsed. 400 enterprises have collapsed, for goodness sake. 400 enterprises have collapsed. So where is the special skill of the private sector which was supposed to bring these enterprises to life? It doesn't exist. You understand what I'm saying? It doesn't exist. In any case, Sena, let's sit back and think a little. Not much. Let's think just a little. Sena, just a little thinking. All of these people who keep shouting, the private sector is the engine of development. The private sector is the engine of this and that and so on. Are they not the people who offer themselves for elections? We elect them as MPs. They become ministers and so on. When they win elections, what happens? They start running from the private sector to the state sector. All of them get appointed as CEOs of the public sector. Why? If the private sector is the engine, stay in the engine. Why are you running away from the engine? You say that the private sector is the engine of development, the engine of growth and so on, and you are running away from the private sector to the public sector. Why? There must be a reason. There must be some reason why they do that. You understand? Now, for me, as an African, for me as somebody who aspires to work with others for the realization of Nkrumah's dream, for the realization of the dream of Modibo Keita, for the realization of the dream of Ahmed Sekou Touré and so on, I feel so very deeply embarrassed by the France-African Summit which took place in Kenya. You know, and Sena, you know, the media sometimes is also part of the problem. What is the media narrative? That is an advancement. And that in the past, France held these conferences only in Francophone countries. Now France is opening up and is bringing in Anglophone countries. Bringing in Anglophone countries into the net of slavery? How can that be an advance? How can that be an advance? Finally, I want to say that if Africa is to develop, and by development I mean improvement in the access of our people to education, improvement of the access of our people to social services such as housing and so on. If Africa is to advance, the African people must have the means of engagement to transform their resources into the things that they need. If Africa is to advance, our languages must not be inferior. Must not be considered as inferior. When I went to school, we were caned for speaking vernacular. If you didn't speak in English,
yes,
and you spoke Ebe, you were whipped. You were given 12 lashes of the cane. That ought to stop. If Africa is to advance. If Africa is to advance, all superstition should be seen as competing superstition. No superstition is superior than the other. All superstition is just competing superstition. That's the way to advance and so on. And I want to see that day when we will advance. But that is only possible if those who are victims of this system of slavery work together, learn together, and work together. They can only learn together and work together by joining organizations of the people, through organizations of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You just reminded me of the conversation we were having recently that had to do with the Takwa mines, whether or not Goldfields' lease should be renewed. And those who oppose the IEA's proposal that should not be renewed, should be given to a Ghanaian company, of the opinion that if we did that, it would make us more of a hostile investment destination, and that nobody will be interested in investing there. When we were talking about the thing, yes, when we were talking about it, it just came to mind. So the kind of conversations we have constantly on our airwaves here in Ghana and many parts of Africa. This morning, we have a special guest in studio with us. He's been listening quietly, Professor Vijay Prashad. He is a guest of a socialist movement of Ghana, joined us. And what we've been discussing is something that he was a part of. Did he arrest you, did he?
No, I have a very lucky 11-year career as a boxer. And what boxing teaches you to do is to duck and weave.
Okay.
People think boxing is about hitting,
okay,
but in fact boxing is about learning to not get hit. And when the policeman came to grab my hand, I ducked, I weaved, and I ran off into a shop, placed myself in the chair in front of a young lady and said to her, "Sell me a phone." And that was my escape from arrest. Had a lot of experience doing this, you know. I can write a manual on how to get out of sticky situations.
That's quite interesting. Anyway, but I was wondering, just because you are from You're not from our part of the world, but you really believe in some of the things that we are pushing for. There are those who also speak about the issue of cooperation, working together, that whether or not we like it, we have to work with countries like France, among others. I wonder what your thoughts are on that in terms of those who will go to this conference, and that will be the argument.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe in xenophobia, which is, I think, an important topic by itself. We oppose xenophobia. We don't think the issue is xenophobia. We think more cooperation is in fact better. The question isn't whether to cooperate with France or whether to cooperate with India or China, whether to cooperate with them or not to cooperate. That's not the question. The question is on what basis? Are you subordinating yourself to another country or another company or another person, or are you dealing with them as equals? The entire point of the Bandung Conference of 1955, the African and Asian Conference held in Indonesia, the entire point of the Bandung Conference and its principles, the 10 principles, was not just sovereignty, it was also dignity. That you should have the dignity to sit at the table with, your former colonizer and dictate to them certain terms. Why should you have terms dictated to you? You just spoke about friendly business environment. Yeah, I mean, think about it. Africa is much larger than Europe. Asia, infinitely larger than Europe. Three of the four largest countries in the world are in Asia. India, China, and Indonesia. Indonesia, the fourth largest country after the United States. We have a lot of people in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and yet we allow ourselves to be judged by rating agencies owned in the United States and Europe. When we treat Moody's, Standard and Poor, we treat them as objective analysts of our business environment. The International Monetary Fund, which takes its lessons from the US Treasury Department, comes in and tells you, well, you're doing certain things correctly, other things not so correctly. It's actually a rating agency, because based on the IMF report, credit markets will come in and charge you a certain interest rate. It may come as a surprise to people who are listening to us that if you come from a poorer country, you actually pay more to borrow money than if you come from a richer country. So the United Kingdom could borrow from credit markets at 2% interest rate. Ghana may have to borrow at 7 or 8%. That means they are actually hitting you with a higher interest rate. And the reason they're doing that is the determination is being made by them. So there's no problem with collaboration, with cooperation, with working together. We must work together. You're talking about Pan-Africanism. That's a principle of cooperation of the people on the African continent, also Afro-descendant people in the Americas and other parts of the world and so on. It's a principle of cooperation, but I tell you, there is going to be no advancement without cooperation of the whole world. Right now, the center of gravity of the global economy has shifted to Asia. That's where the major growth is happening. The Chinese, also India, Indonesia and so on, are developing the latest technologies, new business practices, new labor practices, what in China they called the advanced productive forces. Well, African states need to sit down with Chinese companies, with the Chinese government, with Indian government and so on, and say, look, if you want to come into our country, you're going to have to transfer technology. Not just transfer technology. Where are our engineering colleges? Where are the African engineers who are going to remain in African countries and work to build African infrastructure that is fit for purpose for Africa? I mean, I'll give you an example. I was recently in Ouagadougou, in Burkina Faso. To get from Ouagadougou to Niamey, there's a direct flight. Great. I'm so happy to hear that you don't have to go through Paris to go from Ouagadougou, Paris, Niamey. Okay, that's fine. However, the distance between Ouagadougou and Niamey is 500 kilometers. 500 kilometers, you shouldn't have to get into an aircraft. There should be a high-speed train. India produces a high-speed train 250 kilometers an hour. It's slower than the Chinese, but it's also, I think, relatively cheaper. Also, that train can be built in Africa. You know, the Europeans came together to build Airbus. That was a European plane. They have a European agency for nuclear materials and so on. Where is the African car or the African train? Forget the car. Africa can produce its own train. Imagine the train lines. If you just take Ghana, Kwesi, you know, you go to Nairobi, yes, but also you go up the length of Ghana. You know, high-speed train all the way to the border of Burkina Faso. How this is going to democratize the country? You know, in China, the high-speed rail is actually a form of democracy, because it means that in a holiday, a working person can get on the train, it's reasonably priced, and go back home to spend the festival with their family and then come back. That's democracy. If you have to fly, it's more expensive. Fewer people can do it. So, you know, we have to also think about what kind of infrastructure is fit for purpose for the climate, is fit for purpose for the terrain. If the terrain is flat like the Sahel, you must build trains. That's the only way. Building highways is okay, but it's not going to help you. I mean, we are running into a period when we're going to transition from carbon fuels to other fuels. And, you know, having electric trucks, heavy commercial trucks, it's not really as efficient as running a train line and moving goods on the train. And this continent has really suffered from a lack of trains. There's a reason for that. That's because most infrastructure is built till today from mine to port, so that your raw materials go directly to the port and leave the country. And therefore, inter-African connectivity is extraordinarily low. You know, it's easy to go from the mine to the port. It's hard for people to go from one residential area to another. And that's actually undemocratic. You know, democracy is not just being able to vote. Democracy is about being able to live. And to be able to live is to be able to meet your family, to be able to travel. You know, for tourism, intra-African tourism is extraordinarily low. The other day I was asking somebody, what is the most popular Pan-African institution? First answer was the African Union. I was like, certainly not. Most people have no idea about the African Union. The most popular African institution is the African Cup of Nations. That is the most popular Pan-African institution. And that's popular because it has a certain space in our society. People love football and so on. But here's the thing. Tourism is low. Intra-African tourism. If you are from the African elite, yeah, the people you mentioned in your Fanonist way, you go and have your holiday in Paris, or you go to London, or you go to the United States. You're not taking a trip to Nigeria or taking a trip to the DRC or going to see Kenya and so on. Intra-African travel is extremely low. These are part of the question of cooperation and collaboration. It's not just interstate. And it's not just inter-elite. You know, the elite should travel. This should become a democratic issue, and because it's not, because cooperation levels are so low, the issue of xenophobia or hatred or Afrophobia, you know, hatred of African migrants into one country or the other is so high. I mean, people they welcome Europeans or people from the United States because they come from elite classes into their society, but they don't welcome African migrants who are working class migrants or small merchant migrants. I mean, take the issue of Ghana. Ghana welcomes, what's it called, Newsom, the big gold company? Newmont, yeah, okay. Ghana welcomes Newmont, welcomes Barrick Gold. There's no xenophobia against them. You know, they are welcomed with open arms. In fact, you would give them all kinds of tax benefits and so on. Xenophobia is an interesting word. You know, it's not the opposite of collaboration or cooperation. Xenophobia is a very interesting word. Xenophobia is only used when working class people turn against working class people. That's how it's used in our world today. When ordinary people, frustrated about the destruction of their life, turn on other ordinary people because they feel that it's because of them that their lives have become miserable. Politicians use this as a way to rile up people and so on. There's actually an accurate way to think about xenophobia, which is hatred of corporations that come into your society and tear it apart, that wrench the wealth away. You know, Canadian company like Barrick Gold, for instance, nobody is xenophobic against Barrick Gold. I've never heard the term xenophobia used against corporations. It's only used when working class people go and burn the shacks of other working class people. And I also think that, therefore, our focus on xenophobia as a problem is itself a problem. It's a very badly framed issue. That's not the problem. The problem isn't working class people burning the shacks of working class people. The problem is the politics of the continent, where that becomes the issue, and not these large corporations that are actually coming from outside to plunder the continent, not allowing, you know, people in these working class areas to thrive together. You know, there's nothing wrong with migrating. Migration should be, in fact, welcomed on a continent such as this. The problem is you don't have resources to make your lives enriched.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I asked one question. You're able to go in and out of my second and third topics so nicely. I like the way you did it. That's fantastic. That's a fantastic one. And anyway, let me do just a couple of comments, and then we'll move on to when you started. I was thinking, why wouldn't we do the IMF? Then you landed on xenophobia. So then anyway, quite an interesting one, because I recall I spoke to a Ghanaian living in South Africa, and exactly what you described is what he says. He says, I am in a place where they cannot attack me because of where I work, because of my status. So the poorer you are, the more likely you are to face xenophobic attacks. So this is not about everybody. It's about people of a certain class that are being targeted. Anyway, let me read a couple of comments. This one says, I salute you for hosting one of my favorite global human rights advocates, Mr. Prashad. Whenever I see any video with his name, I become excited. The Prashad duo has me completely hooked this morning. Thank you very much. And this one also says, good morning, Panafrican TV. Anytime I listen to my mentor, Uncle PCP, I feel blessed and enriched in knowledge. May Allah continue to give him long life and good health. Send that from Balu Latif from Dasima in Sisala West. Says this one says, good morning. Please ask Mr. Pratt, has he been talking to President Mahama about what is going on in Ghana? I don't know specifically what the issue that you want him to talk to him about. There are many things going on in Ghana. David Chachu Abaji says, we Africans must believe in our abilities and potentials to develop without external help. We are more than capable. Let's take our destinies into our own hands. There's also this one says, good morning, Prajidia, our General Secretary, and he says that I raised that issue of Africa-France Summit was problematic. It is a strategy for continuous exploitation of our resources, and Africa as a continent must act swiftly to protect the future of this generation. Thank you very much. And this one says, we visionlessly failed to partner and advance Kantanka, UT Bank. Is it Anthracite Air or Antrak Air, Ndum Inc., among others. We are the engines that will let us develop. Ghana cannot even produce tricycles. Thank you. Baba Inusa said that from Tamale. And there's Edward Kwekuna passes. Professor Jeffrey Sachs has appealed to Africa to unite and grow their economies about 10% per year to catch up with the developed world. Strangely, our Ghanaian politicians spend all their time defending and attacking Abronians. How can we progress as a country? Kuku sent that from La Paz. This one says, France loans out Africans' own money in accordance with the Europeans' 1884 scrambled Scramble of Africa Agreement. All the resources of the European colonies belong to their European colonial countries. So all the resources of African colonies belong to the European colonial powers. This is what France has held on till today through its black African agents, the assimilated heirs of states and leaders, loan South Africans' own money to them in accordance with. Some of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's enterprises and factories that has survived till today can be found under the umbrella of GIHOC, engineered by the late Abrefa Buzia PP government. In fact, this one says, Yakubu Dauda says, well said, sir. I hope African leaders are listening and will work on it. Geoffrey Bache says, after the legendary and visionary Society for Dr. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana and Mother Africa is finished, most policymakers, politicians of today are timid, greedy, and clueless. Kwesi Pratt Jr. is a legend. Live long, stay blessed. This one is from David Chacho Abaji. Says, we Africans must believe in our abilities and potential to develop without. I have read that on another platform. Franz Gordon said there's a conscious deficiency among poorer countries in Africa, and that makes it difficult to get African countries to unite on one common sense. Kwame Buenate says he was asking whether President Mahama was there. Yes, he was there. There's Issa Adam Sesena. Who he was is factual. So Issa Adam Sesena, at independence, President Houphouët-Boigny was not only a citizen of France and an MP of the French National Assembly. He was in fact the Minister of Health. Other President Charles de Gaulle. In fact, the seat of government in Abidjan belongs to France, for which Ivory Coast pays rent to France till date. Anjos Abang Ahmed says there should be deliberate strategy by Pan-Africanists to train our youth who in turn run for offices to realize the unity of Africa. So those are some of the comments you're sharing with us. Keep them coming, and thank you very much for staying tuned to the mother of all talk shows, Alhaji and Alhaji. So now, because Prof landed on xenophobia, we'll go to xenophobia, and I'll start this time around with knees pointing me to you. Solo, please.
Well, I mean, the last 1 month we have been discussing this issue of xenophobic attacks and xenophobia in South Africa, but it's a very important issue that must reawaken Africans and our conscience. It must break our conscience that the battle ahead is enormous, because you cannot rationalize in any way why an African in South Africa will see a fellow African as an enemy and telling them to go back to their country. And when they are speaking, they say, go back to your continent. So to that extent, they see themselves as not being part of the continent. In a larger scheme of things, South Africa that stands to lose greatly in this whole melee. You are talking about a continent of about 1.6 billion. You are almost 65 million. That's about 4% of the population of Africa. So in terms of trading, if you are going to distance yourself from the larger African population, where would South Africa be? It's the reason why we must have responsible leadership in all these countries. And I find it very interesting that the South African authorities are not doing much. In areas that you think that the elite must man up, they are the ones rather encouraging. If you look at the KwaZulu-Natal area, where a mayor is actually highly involved in seizing keys of foreigners to businesses and giving it to their workers, then the matter is above the surface that all of us are scratching. That it has become a national, more or less, agenda to try to appease the foot soldiers. This year too happens to be their local elections, so allow them to do whatever they want so that we get back our power. But that must not be the focus. The focus is the power that you had in the past. What did you use to do? How did you benefit that power to society? So sometimes when I see politicians, just like we have back home here, someone loses an election, the next moment is fighting to come back to power. I ask myself, but the power that you have, what did you use it for? If you really use the power well, I mean, they would have maintained you as a leader of the country. So it comes back to how Africa is disjointed. And I love it when he said that one of the testers said we must begin to have people that have that Pan-African conscience in this country. Hardly would you have any institute. Apart from occasionally you would have the socialist movement of Ghana preaching about the need for Pan-Africanism. You take all the political parties. What is their ideology? In fact, I took time one day, a youth program, to ask all the young ones that have gathered, be it MPP and this is that, what is your party's own political ideology on certain matters? None of them could tell me where they stood, and I find it very interesting. So I asked them, based on what are you supporting a particular political party? So it calls for the need to have a well-structured institution with a clearly defined ideology about Africa and also party position. That's the first point. Secondly, the way and manner we get people involved in our body politics, especially elections into, be it a member of parliament and subsequently being selected as a minister of state. And I'm using Ghana as a typical case. I mean, Sena, how does one become a minister of state in Ghana? You have to just, first of all, fight your way to parliament. Because the constitution is such that majority of the people will be selected from parliament. Now you go to the down there where parliamentarians are selected on various parties, what's the name, platform, primaries. I mean, come to think of it, our brother was a member of parliament, is that what you're saying? Yes. When he comes here, the level, the depth that he has on subject matters, he is a professional that you would need in parliament to shape the laws, particularly the very sector that he has the profession. A very rare sector. He was in parliament, but the political party and by extension the constituents have other considerations. How much are you giving to us? How much are you paying to us? That is the foremost consideration in our part of the world. So at the end of the day, the quality of representation all of us are expecting does not happen here. And the situation in Ghana is a microcosm of the entire Africa continent. So when you have elected people that really thinks about the development of the continent into your various parliaments, how then do you get the African agenda being pushed? It's the reason why we are having all these things happening. We are not getting the right set. That is not to say we don't have the right set of human resources. We have it in abundance. We have people that can actually take a turn around the fortunes of our continent. But the issue is, are they given the opportunity? Now, a lot of people that respect themselves, they don't want to get closer to our politics. So that I will be insulted, so that a small amount of money that I've saved will be taken from me, so that, I mean, they don't want to get closer. So day in and day out, the quality of the discourse, the quality of representation, and quality of governance is being reduced. You understand? But I believe that the way and manner we are going about things, South Africa would have to be punished for that. Not physically going to South Africa to go and attack them. Economically, they have to suffer for it. Because if I'm a country called Ghana, this year, for instance, Goldfields Ghana would have to have their lease renewed. Is that not the case? Goldfields Ghana is a South African company. So what moral justification, what commercial justification, what national justification would this administration have in renewing the lease, the mining lease for Goldfields Ghana? When Ghanaians are being sent back from South Africa under the pretext that the Ghanaians there are taking over their jobs. So if you are sending Ghanaians back to Ghana, then the rational thing for this administration to do is to also send that company back and replace that company with the Ghanaian business. So that those coming back from South Africa, those that have mining skill, they can have a place to work. Those that have business skill, when you open a mine, people can cook and feed, canteen, they can have jobs to do. Those that have barbering skill, they can be setting their shop there and be working. That's why I started by telling you that the greatest loser in all these battles will be South Africa. Because this economy called Ghana is held by South Africans in terms of the African mix. Most of us use DSTV. MTN is there. First National Bank is there. Game and Shop is there. Go to the mining sector. Anglo Gold, you have the gold fields, and so on and so forth. So integral critical sectors of the economy. If you control telecommunication, you control mining sector, my goodness, then that is the economy you have. Can you imagine Ghanaian enterprises controlling these businesses and the profits thereof stay in this country? Every year, what do we do? What we complain about? Fluctuation of our exchange rate. It comes about because people take out or take away profits in foreign and in dollars out of the economy. So you are virtually left with nothing. That's why any time the finance minister comes to talk about the gross domestic product, I say, look, you are not doing Ghanaians any great service. Talk about the gross national product. Because gross domestic product does not mean that all the figures you are churning out belongs to Ghanaians. It only means the total worth of goods that we are producing locally and its value. But the gross national product measures the contribution of Ghanaians to the economy. And if you don't do that, you will not be able to measure our true contribution. And we can have that impactful contribution when we are holding or we are controlling the critical sectors. Everything privatized. Last 2 years or so, we spoke about, what's the name, lithium. It became a subject matter. The company that took that lithium, I understand they have already sold it to another company. You see what they do to us? But they gave us all the beautiful excuse why they must be allowed to mine. And we had chiefs. I remember on this station, I told you that, look, that's how they behave. They will go and see the chiefs, find some Land Cruisers for them, and all of a sudden they start talking about economics that they themselves do not understand. When, as a matter of fact, they had invested less than $200 million into that business. The National Service Secretary, how much are we told have been stolen? It's not 2.4 billion according to Auditor General. Convert 2.4 billion into dollars and see what corruption alone, if you're able to halve it, the amount of money that will be left in the economy to be developing these businesses. By the way, in modern day business, you don't need to have all the expertise. It's outsourced. You go and buy. If you go to the UAE, you have a lot of Indian nationals that are working in critical sectors of the economy. They have been procured to come and work for us. And we can do same here. If you are mining sector, we go and procure you, come and work for us, we pay you. So that the money stays here. Unless and until we do that, Sena, you will continue to have these kind of xenophobic attacks, when as a matter of fact, it's not everybody in this country. The population of Ghana is 34 million, by the way. How many Ghanaians are living outside this country? They will not even be up to 10%. It means majority of Ghanaians still believe in this country. Likewise, all the other countries. And there is a reason why we were born into this part of the world. A company like the Future Global Resources that left Bogosu Christian Mining. Go and see the sort of things that they did there. We gave the mine to them, they left a debt of $87 million. They have run away, they will not even pay electricity. They have run away. With this, now they are fighting Ghana government that there has to be arbitration. What happened was not right. And they would do that because they realized that the system was that loose. Let's look at it, and I understand the government said they are bringing 300 people. Bring them and let them come and settle in this economy. And let's all build Ghana together. I
think one of the things that may have attracted them is the package that the government has offered. That we are not just bringing in, we are helping you start over. This is from Samuel Kujawu, who says, good morning. These are the remnants of apartheid in South Africa. Like the one you spoke to, there are indigenous Indians, Europeans, Lebanese, and other white people whose great ancestors were born in South Africa, who speak their local languages. It becomes difficult to identify white illegal immigrants in South Africa, so the anger is on the black Africans who they believe are taking their jobs from them, even though their predicament is from the fact the apartheid regime educated their women rather than the men. This makes the women employable and the men jobless and uneducated. The cause of all this, Samuel Kujawu sent that from Gomua, Bujumbura. There's Howard Bush, who says, oppression and separatism has run deep, but our blood runs deeper. So we stay wise as we rise throughout the world. Me.
Thank you once again for the opportunity. Whenever we speak about xenophobia, it's South Africa, and the last time I was here, I gave an analogy, and I said we should cast our minds into the future, look into that glass prism of what is happening in Israel today, apartheid Israel today, with all the difficulties that Iran is going through. And you would find 30 years down the line, an Iranian guy walking on the streets of Palestine, in Jerusalem, being hounded like a dog by Palestinians. That's what's happening in South Africa. And I decided to repeat it again because I sincerely believe that it is a lack of knowledge. You know, like the Bible says, it says, lack of knowledge, my people perish. It's just a lack of knowledge. Because the apartheid system actually made black Africans slaves on their own land and told them that you are better off as a slave on your own land than the other Africans who are, excuse my French, monkeys on the other side of the continent. So when you watch news in South Africa in the 80s, 70s, 60s, it was South African news and then African news, as if South Africa was on a different continent. So the people that you are dealing with in South Africa are very, 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 very naive of the realities of the world and the truth of the world. When you go to Namibia, it's even worse. Namibia, almost 90% of the country belongs to like maybe 5% of the population or 1% of the population. That's the reality. And Namibia is like 4 times the size of Ghana. There are farms that are about half the size of Ghana, owned by one person or a family. What is happening in Palestine today happened in Namibia. The Herero people, the Namib people, they were exterminated. So, and it was not just there. It happened in South Africa. It happened in Botswana. It happened in Zimbabwe and Zambia. They were exterminated. The people were wiped out. In their millions, not in their thousands, millions, over a period of 500 years. When our people were being shipped off onto the other side of the world, these people were being buried in mass graves. Some were buried alive. So the trauma that South Africans have gone through is not something that can be written off in 25 years. So the people that you see, the last time I said it here, I said, look, if you go to South Africa and have a conversation with an average South African, you can tell that he has PTSD. Post-traumatic stress disorder. Their actions, the way they think, that's why some people can kill without thinking, you know. They can cause harm without, because many of them are, in quotes, orphans. Many of them. Uncle Kwesi Pratt told us about the current president of South Africa and his background. Many of them are, people who were part of even the system. Because to eat, you have to be part of the system. And unfortunately, our black brothers that took power in 1994 under the ANC have not even done better. In many cases, they have done worse than even the apartheid government. And I give you an example of housing, social housing. Even the homes that were built by apartheid South African governments in Soweto and Co. are better than what the current government in South Africa is building for its own people. So it doesn't give the justification. Now people think that it's better to bring the DA back to power. They're actually governing together with the DA. Correct. So these are very real truths. And I give an example of South Africa saying that, look, South Africa is like a cappuccino, a cup of cappuccino, coffee. You have the blacks at the bottom, you have a white cream on top, and you have some few black people scattered on top like chocolate droppings, you know, caramel droppings. Those ones are the BEE people, which includes people like Ramaphosa. They have become billionaires at the expense of the rest of the people. So when other black people like our people go there, to work and do the menial jobs, the average South African thinks that he's coming for my job. In fact, it's a job that the average South African cannot do. He hasn't got the skill set. Many of them were in these Bantustans and Soweto and co. These were like reservations. These are human zoos that were dumped in. And today they become tourist attractions. Some of them were dumped there to go and die because they were like in coal power plants, the base of the coal power plants. When you go to Soweto, you see those two big towers there. They are coal power plant towers, cooling towers. So this is the reality of South Africa today. So we see a glossy South Africa, a beautiful Cape Town with a beautiful beach and a Table Mountain, and you can visit it. I've been there, I've enjoyed it. But when you go beyond, I remember when I was in South Africa with my wife, the driver that drove us around used to be a driver for one of the apartheid leaders, I think P.W. de Klerk or somebody. He was his driver. Because I was coming from Parliament at that time, they gave me him as a driver. So he'd take care of my security and a few things. So when we were having a conversation, he was nostalgic about apartheid, telling me why it was a better system than what they have today, and that he was disappointed in ANC. That was how bad it was. That somebody who fought ANC from within now was bitter about apartheid, about ANC, and wished apartheid was back because he said they had better jobs, they had better pensions, they had better lives. So poor leadership has also accounted for this. Not poor leadership just in South Africa, poor leadership on the African continent. Because we've not been able to create the jobs for our masses. We've not been able to create the wealth for our people. We've not been able to harness the opportunities that are there, that God has blessed us with for our people. Half of the mining companies you see in Africa are either Canadian, Australian, or South African. They are all British. Canada is part of Britain, Australia is part of Britain. They send A, when he comes for the contract, 10 years, B comes to take over and comes to negotiate for the same set of tax breaks and incentives. So we have to start wearing our thinking cap, and I'm taking my uncle's phrase. We should be wearing our thinking cap and be reading between the lines as a people, making sure that we serve our people's interests first. Otherwise, xenophobia will go nowhere. It may even deepen and become wider. Because today, it is South Africa. Tomorrow, it might be Nigeria. Maybe in the next future, it might be Morocco and Algeria. Today, Africans, people of African descent or black people in Morocco are being rounded up every day and sent back home and sent back to other African countries. Why? Because the EU is saying that, oh, you know what, be the vanguard on our border. Yes. We'll give you money to keep your people from coming to Europe. Do you know there are a number of European refugees around the world? The whole of South America, from North America, in fact, from Canada to Argentina, every European that you find there is a refugee. At one point in time in history, they were refugees and they went there. Brazil, after the First World War, they sent thousands of white refugees to South America, to Brazil, from Italy, from Spain. They went to Mexico, they went to Paraguay. These were refugees from even Switzerland. The Amish that you find in America, they are Swiss refugees, religious refugees that went there. So this is the reality. And in fact, in places like Australia and South Africa, they even sent prisoners. Prisoners from Scotland, from their colonies, from Europe, from Britain. These are the people who went to populate places like Australia and co. And they used Morocco and co as vanguards to stop us from letting our people go there. Well, in the future when we have power, we will know what to do. We will open the floodgates for them to go and go and bring our resources that they have stolen.
Exactly.
Our resources that they have stolen for the last 500 years, we are going to take a bit of it, the piece of our pie. We're going to go back there. We'll send our what do you call it? Our prisoners to cross the river, the sea and go. We'll put them on the boat and let them go. Just because we believe in collaboration, like we rightly said earlier. We want to foster a world where there's unity and there's equality and equality in opportunities. That is what we are looking for. So coming back to our subject of xenophobia, it's not going to end if we don't change the narrative of the African, if we don't change the narrative of black people, if we don't create the jobs for our people, we don't change the economic dynamics that makes us be at the bottom and others be at the top. We can create a society where as the rich are getting richer, the poor are also getting less poorer. We are climbing up. That's how it's supposed to be. You cannot create a system where people are going up and others are staying at the bottom. The inequalities that we see today. No. Whilst the people are going up, the rich are going up, the people at the bottom are also climbing. Countries like Singapore have been able to do it. China has done it with over 800 million people. In 1983, China was as poor as Ghana today, or as Africa today. In the last 30 years, China has moved 800 million people out of poverty. Do the Chinese have two heads? No. Do they have two brains? Or they have 4 ears and they hear better than we do? They have the same head like we have, and yet have been able to change the destiny of their people. And that's what I believe that Africans must do for our people. And it comes with right leadership. It comes with the leadership that understands the problem. Our leaders don't understand the problem. And I have had the privilege of working with them, sitting with them. When we go to the African Parliament in South Africa, in Johannesburg, Midrand, it's just about after the meeting. In fact, 5 minutes after the meeting commences, half of the people are out of the room.
They're going to shop.
They are going to do shopping or they are going to eat. That's it. There's no core discussion. Unless you really, really want to participate, there's nothing. People just come and stand on the stages and give speeches and go away.
No.
That's how bad it is. I've been there. I was there twice. So we really, 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 really have to go back to the drawing board and change the narrative for our people. And it is possible. It doesn't take a million people. Like Deng Xiaoping said, it doesn't matter whether the cat is yellow, the trap is yellow or green or blue. Insofar as it catches mice, it is good enough. And he learned from smaller countries like Singapore and Malaysia. Deng Xiaoping, he went on a travel. He went to Japan, he went to Singapore, and he went to Malaysia. When he came back, he changed his mind and changed his narrative for China, and has changed the destiny of China today. Today, go to China. They have some of the best technology in the world. China, you can have a bullet train that takes you from Shanghai to, from Guangzhou to Shanghai. And it's about an hour's bullet train trip. It's like here to, Abuja. Accra to Abuja, 1 hour. You'll be there. You don't even have to carry a passport. You just have to show your face on the machine, and the machine will pick your picture, and the door will open, and you sit in the train, and you are gone. That's how advanced China has become. This is a country where, in 1983, people didn't even have cars. They didn't have motorbikes. They were riding bicycles. The Buzanga bicycle that we have in Ghana, it came from China. That's what we used to have in Ghana. Yes. It came from China. Today, China has gone to space. China has gone to the other side of the moon. India has gone to the other side of the moon, where we cannot see from here. We've never seen it before, but they've been there. That is what good leadership is able to churn out. So we as a people must sit up. If we don't sit up, I said xenophobia would be everywhere. And even in Ghana, I keep telling people, when we see our Niger refugees at our junctions, on our streets, begging, the first thing we say is that, oh, the social services should come for them and send them back home. Don't we say that? Isn't that xenophobia? It's xenophobia. Here in Ghana, I was in my car with my business friend. We went through the western region. We checked on a few things and ended up near Obuasi. And an immigration officer just rode his motorbike, came to us, stopped the car, and told him to get out of the car. Why? Where's your passport? Where is this? Blah, blah. I said, no, you don't do it. It's racism. It's a form of xenophobia. I said, look, no, that's not it. You should have called all of us out of the car, and then you profile us and ask us questions, so that he's also part of it. I'm also part of it. I show you my ID card. He also asks him his questions. He shows him his ID card. He literally pulled the guy out of the car, and this guy is good investor. I hope you understand what I'm saying. So we also have that problem. Even here, we do it. We say the same things. So, like the Bible says, you remove the speck out of your eye before you remove the log out of your brother's eye. We also have to go back to the drawing board and do the right things. But to conclude, at the crux of the matter is economic emancipation. Africans must be emancipated, and nobody's going to do it for us. No angel is going to come from heaven to come and do it. No Nimokafri or Ayata Frem who come from anywhere to do it. We have to do it ourselves. When you go to Dubai and you see Dubai what it is today, I had the privilege of seeing Dubai when I was a child. It was an empty desert. There are places that I deliberately go and stand and I look out and I recollect that I stood here and this place was nothing. It was empty. And today it is something. It wasn't built by angels. It was built by human beings. In fact, it was built by foreigners. Indians. You know how Indians that are there in Dubai? Yeah. Over 1 million, 1.5 million. Do you know the number of Filipinos that are there in India? In Dubai? Over 1 million Filipinos. Do you know the number of Bangladeshis? 1 million Bangladeshis.
More foreigners.
In the UAE. The indigenous people of UAE, about 300,000 or 500,000. 500,000. Everybody else that you see there is a foreigner and has come there to build wealth. Created jobs and build wealth and build what you see there. And even in our own local parlance, there's a saying that what does that mean? How do you say that in English? How do you paraphrase it? We use foreigners to build our towns or our lives. That's it. So even in our own local parlance, we believe in that already. It's something that we understand and accept. That you build with foreigners. So there's absolutely nothing wrong if the investors are Chinese. Nothing wrong if the investors are Turkish. Nothing wrong if the investors are Ghanaian. Insofar as it is in the collective interest of our people. That is what we are looking for. And that is what Africa must be telling its people. That's how you get the technology transfer. China, you see today, didn't get the technology transfer overnight. They brought Germans. Siemens was the first company that Chinese went to look for. Turkey, the industrialization of Turkey today was built by Turkish people who went to work in Germany post First World War. The Turkish families that were moved to Germany because the Ottoman Empire had lost power. The Ottomans were supported by the Kurds. So a lot of them went into Germany as refugees. They are the ones that have come back. There's this popular German player, Ozil. Yeah. He's from that group of people. Even the former British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. His grandfathers were Turkish. They are part of those people, Turkish refugees that came into Britain, and today they have become what they are. And they brought the technology back. They brought the industrialization back, brought the investments back. So Africans must begin to acquire the knowledge. And I want to end on that note. I started on the lack of knowledge. But we must acquire the knowledge, understanding of the world. Open up to other Africans so that other Africans can bring their skills into their economy and grow. But if we are going to fight for the crumbs, then it's not worth it. Because what South Africans are fighting for with Africans is the crumbs. Who is the watchman at the factory, and who is the security man at the door, and who is the factory hand? No. Meanwhile, the main issues of land, of resource, of the wealth that our forefathers fought for have been put aside, and we are fighting over the frivolous things. And I don't think that it's a cause that is lost, and I don't also think that it's happening without foreign interference. There is the unseen hand of some people playing this game, pitching us against each other, so that we would always not have a focus on the right issues. I would even put it beyond what is happening in the ICC, where South Africa is forcing or pushing an agenda against apartheid Israel, and they can be. I don't put it beyond them. They are capable of pushing some of these agendas and getting us away from our tracks. Let me put it that way. So, Sena, xenophobia is something that we can deal with as a people. I sincerely believe so, that we can deal with it as a people. But it will take the right leadership. Leaders who love Africa and are prepared to commit and sacrifice for our continent and our people. That is the only thing that will bring an end to xenophobia in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before I come to Comrade Pratt, a few comments that I'd like to go through. Issa Adam says the first xenophobic attack in post-independent Africa happened in Ghana under the Progress Party government of Kofi Abrefa Buzia in 1969. Africans in Ghana were chased out from Ghana like cattle. It is unfortunate that it is happening again in South Africa in another form. Kwame Nkrumah must be turning in his grave with so much pain. Zach Obispo says, very impressive and up-to-the-point analysis. I couldn't agree more with me. Black South Africans are yet to understand that they are also blacks, just like other Africans. For them, being black doesn't mean you are one of them. Africans have a long way to go. And for all of these xenophobic attacks, it is the government that benefits because the attacks on Africans would have been directed at the government if it's not for the presence of blacks. Like Solo has said, the government of Ghana shouldn't renew the lines of goldfields. No wonder hardly would one see a black South African in their numbers in Europe. James K. Saba says it's too serious. How can, okay, he's talking about, okay, he's talking about something else altogether. This one, we Africans must take that and exploit our natural resources to our own benefit. David said that. This one says, in fact, Professor Adi Manzuri, in order to downgrade that, Nkrumah once said in Agri-Fraser Memorial Lectures that Ivory Coast was better than Ghana after supposedly bets between Hufei and Nkrumah. Thomas Bauer Sender says, it was Ghana who first started xenophobic by attacking Nigerians. Why are we crying? South Africa is just copying what Ghana did to them.
When Ghana did it to Nigeria, Nigeria retaliated and says that we are brothers. You understand? Yes.
And this one says, Mr. Host.
Brothers. Oh, yes.
And this one says, the recent xenophobic attack in South Africa involving South African nationals and the Ghanaian citizens' most reprehensible and regrettable occurrence that he said must be condemned in the strongest and unequivocal terms. Such acts of hostility rooted in intolerance and misguided prejudice not only violate the fundamental principles of human dignity and peaceful coexistence, but also erode the very fabric of African solidarity and brotherhood upon which our continent's unity is predicated. Ernest Everlove Kwashi sent that one from Ladade Kotopong. Mr. Pratt?
Well, I mean, I'm clear in my mind that what is happening in South Africa is the unfinished business of apartheid. We did not complete the defeat of apartheid. And it is a remnant of apartheid, you know, which is coming up so very strongly. One of the questions that I ask is that, look, today in South Africa, 80% of South African lands are still in the hands of white settlers. And South Africans are not expressing this level of anger. The level of anger they're expressing against Nigerians, Ghanaians, and so on, is not being expressed towards these white settlers. Something must explain this. Something must explain this. And what explains this is simply apartheid indoctrination. You understand? I mean, soon after apartheid, I was in Joburg, and my shock was that when ordinary lumping elements referred to you as an African, it was meant to be an insult. Okay? It was meant to be an insult. What is the origin of this? The origin of this is that the apartheid system, its propaganda and so on, deliberately sowed seeds of discourse between the South African blacks and other blacks living outside South Africa. So the ordinary South African was actually taught that he was in a better condition because he was living in a state run by whites. And this destruction, you know, of the brain and so on has not been repaired yet. Okay. To be honest with you, apartheid was essentially capitalism disguised by race coloring. It was essentially capitalism. And to today, capitalism in South Africa is hiding under the cover. And the cover is not being exposed to what it is. So there's unemployment in South Africa, not because it is running an exploitative capitalist system, but it's because Nigerians have invaded. The South African does not have access to healthcare, not because healthcare has been privatized, not because healthcare is available only to the rich and powerful, but because Ghanaians have invaded South Africa and so on. Okay, so it is this distortion which needs to be fought. Now, I told you, I visited South Africa soon after apartheid. And I went to Soweto. And residents of Soweto were showing me the difference between houses constructed under apartheid and houses which had been constructed under ANC. And their claim was that houses constructed under apartheid were much better than houses constructed under ANC. There were bigger rooms and so on. And it struck me that something was fundamentally wrong. Now, for many people who have visited South Africa, those who go to South Africa and visit the shanty towns and so on, it is shocking. Because South Africa is one of the 3 biggest economies on this continent. Indeed, its level of development sometimes is equated with capitalist Europe and so on. And yet the living conditions of the lumping elements in South Africa is completely shocking. We live in Accra and we refer to Nima as a slum and so on. The conditions in Nima are far, 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 far better than the conditions in the shanty towns, in Joburg and in Cape Town and so on. At least, people who live in Nima have access to potable water. They have access to electricity. They live in block houses and so on. In the shanty towns, people live in tin houses. They have no access to potable water. They have no access to electricity and so on. That's how dire the situation is. And these people are desperate. They want to break out of poverty. Apartheid education did not open their eyes to the exploitative nature of neocolonialism. Neocolonial capital, you understand? So they saw things in terms of them versus us and so on. And that mentality is still there. Somebody must be blamed for the high unemployment rate. Some people ought to take the blame for the fact that they have no access to water and so on. They cannot blame the system which is capitalism. The lumping elements, it doesn't even strike down that is the problem. So they see Nigeria, they see Ghana, they see Zimbabwe, and they see Botswana instead of capitalism. That is the problem. Now, how do we deal with this problem? You don't deal with this problem by nationalizing South African business interests. It only exacerbates the problem. You don't deal with the problem by giving South Africans 24 hours to leave your country. It worsens the problem. You don't deal with the problem by crossing your borders and so on. It only worsens the problem. You deal with the problem by waging a struggle, first and foremost, to unite the working people of South Africa. You wage a struggle to open up the minds of the people of South Africa to the real causes of exploitation. It takes time. It's not something which is going to happen tomorrow. It takes time. You understand? Education. It takes time, it takes education and so on. But you see, for me, one of the worst impact of the so-called xenophobic attack in South Africa is the fact that all of us are trying to understand this problem using a shorthand. Okay? And this, what is the shorthand? The shorthand is that South Africans are xenophobic. They are attacking us and we have to fight back. The problem is that it's only a small minority of South Africans who are on the streets visiting mayhem on other Africans. And there are institutions and organizations in South Africa who are fighting against this utter madness. There's the Communist Party of South Africa. It is not xenophobic. There is COSATU fighting against xenophobia. There's NUMSA fighting against xenophobia. There is the Economic Freedom Party fighting against xenophobia. All of these are South African institutions. So how do we reduce these xenophobic attacks to attacks by South Africans? Because it is certainly not by South Africans. Now, sometimes I hear some of the commentators, and I listen to the debate in the Senate in Nigeria. And senators got up and said, look, these South Africans, we have to punish them. They have no respect for the sacrifices we made to liberate them from apartheid, and so on. My brother and my sister and my senator in Nigeria, those lumping elements leading these attacks, which are unfortunately misnamed xenophobia, they don't even know that Kwame Nkrumah ever existed. They have not read Nkrumah's book about neocolonialism. They have not read Nkrumah's book about class struggle and so on. It doesn't exist. They don't know. They don't even know the sacrifices which the Cuban internationalists made. How Cubans won the battle in Quito Carnival, which led to the liberation of South Africa from apartheid. They don't know. So you are wasting your time referring to the heroic days when we made sacrifices in the struggle against apartheid and so on. It doesn't resonate. You understand? They don't know that we have a common cause and so on. So this is the reality in South Africa. And I am happy, and I've said that before, I'm exceedingly happy, that Ghana's foreign minister actually wrote to the chairperson of the AU Commission asking that this matter should be placed on the agenda of the next AU summit. And he didn't end there. He actually addressed the media and told the media that the problem is not South Africa and that he's satisfied with the efforts that the president of South Africa and others are making in dealing with this problem. And that the way forward lies in an honest discussion of all Africans. I felt very happy with this move. And I felt very happy with this move because I have come to believe that there's no other means of overcoming the problems of Africa other than through Pan-African unity. Without Pan-African unity, we are not going anywhere. We are not going to be able to resolve the economic and social problems which confront us. And therefore, no matter what the problem that confronts the African people, our objective should be to move towards Pan-African unity. Yeah. Because that's the only way we're going to get out of this mess of neocolonialism. The only way to get out is Pan-African unity. And under all circumstances, we must at all times pursue that objective, which was set by the 5th Pan-African Congress in Manchester. And the 5th Pan-African Congress in Manchester ended with a resolution, one, calling for the intensification of the national liberation struggle, second, the unity of the African people under the banner of socialism. That's the only path to liberation from all of these problems.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And okay. So now we're waiting to hear from our Foreign Affairs Ministry on what the next steps will be. But they've indicated that they'll be working to see somewhere next week if they will be able to bring those Ghanaians back, especially with the assurances that they are giving to them. And it's also refreshing to hear Ghanaians, they're also applauding the High Commission there, that they are up to the task and have been very helpful under the circumstances. Well, a few comments, just our time is all virtually up. Just a few comments from those who are watching us. There's this one which says, how could this man, Ni's constituents have voted him out of parliament? Such brilliance, such experience, such energy. I now understand why some Ghanaians still don't see what the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah has done to the country. My old man used to say, Ghana for Empire Adipa. That is I like your confidence level. This is Tafina says, good morning. Sena.
Is that the only one? I mean, every time I've listened to me, and I've come to admire him greatly over the last year or two since we started working with Raji and Raji. One question I keep asking, how did he find himself in the meeting?
That's what I disagree. He thought he was with the party. I was in the MPP. There were clear-cut principles, except that we had a group of people who took over the party and decided to depart from the core principles. Exactly. But I'm very surprised. I would be rather surprised that he continues to stay there with the benefit of the current situation happening to the party.
We'll fix it. Don't worry.
Ayo, Montreal.
This is how come they are asking me a question and you are answering is that
because I was in the same
party. We're the same party together.
Is that what they call stray bullet or something?
Straight.
This one, we need to go after their business that are making money here in Ghana. The same thing that people have been saying. The same thing that he's saying. Hadi in Pig Farm. Okay. I hope you are okay. We are not talking about us. Okay, so those are some of the comments that you've been sharing with us. A lot more, but I have to go through them before I read some of them. We have some 5 minutes. And interesting, because he's our guest here, one thing. Yeah. Yes, let him have it. Let Prof have it. So the Prof on the issue of, Mr. Pad has commented on the response to xenophobia, because that's a major question all African countries are having to answer. How do we respond to this? And then the second part about the last topic which we would have discussed, I know you touched on it, the PCI, that Ghana has decided to go on with the IMF. Those two issues.
Well, I'm happy to say that early next month, Grieve Chelwa, who's a Zambian economist, and I will release a book which is called How the International Monetary Fund Suffocates Africa. And one of the, it's a very straightforward book, it's not too complicated. It lays out, for instance, one of the ideas, which is that the anti-corruption issue is a trap because it's used to basically attack state institutions, public institutions, which on the African continent have been weakened by lack of financing, by the attrition of talented people who've gone into the private sector rather than the public sector, and so on. So, you can't run a state if the state is being destroyed. And then the IMF comes in, and the IMF operates effectively as the research institute and the brains child and the planning commission for a democratic country. So you have a democracy, you have elected officials, but the thinking for the elected officials is now subcontracted or outsourced to the International Monetary Fund, to the OECD in Europe, to the World Bank, and so on. And they come in and they posture in such an interesting way. They say things like, look, I agree with you about poverty and so on, but you need to be realistic. There's a way to talk about these things. You got to calm down. You got to be realistic. You got to look at what's possible. And indeed, when they say you've got to look at what's possible, what they mean is you've got to follow our plan. And that plan is interesting. Because every few years they change the acronyms. SAP, ECIP, PCI, this, that and the other. And it's befuddling because, you know, they are very clever. The IMF over this last period has actually released a series of statements saying we were wrong about this, we were wrong about that, we have to reconsider structural adjustment. But every time they come out and they say we were wrong about this, we were wrong about that, they return to you with different acronyms, different slightly changed structures, and they pull the same fast one on you. What do you think is going to happen now? You have Ghana, it's a democratic country, elected officials, you have a judiciary which is independent, you have all these, you also have a very fine university, you have economists at the university. Unfortunately, many of them are not trained to think independently. They also think along the IMF lines. But then you have these institutions that are not democratic. You have institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, you have McKinsey consulting services which get hired in by governments, and they all produce knowledge and information as if in a hall of mirrors. They just sort of mirror each other, and they start convincing people, but there's no way to go unless you balance your budget, you don't do any special financing with the Chinese, because after all the Chinese, they say, are the real colonial power on the continent. You continue to borrow through the Eurobond market, which is a terrible place to borrow money, and you go further into debt. Don't use the debt to build infrastructure. That's apparently a bad idea. Instead, use the debt to pay the debt and use the debt for consumption, which is extremely bad advice for any country. If I was to give advice to a country like Ghana, you increase your net fixed capital investment, you build infrastructure, you build your railways, you build your factories, you build power plants. Don't listen to the Western consultants who come in and say it's green energy and so on. What they mean by green energy is actually, here's our package. And so my advice to any government is to tell the IMF to hoof it and create your own thinking, recreate the planning commission, start having an internal debate and discussion about the 20-year plan for a country like Ghana. But beyond that, what is the regional plan? It doesn't matter that somebody speaks French and somebody speaks English. I mean, for God's sake, in Ghana you have over 50 languages. So it's not like the fact of French is somehow befuddling. It's just another European language. Hire a translator. It's not that complicated. Regionalism is absolutely essential. The fact that you have Senegal and Gambia, one French speaker, it's ludicrous, to have that. It's a ludicrous situation. So on the one hand, national planning commissions, ECOWAS needs to be set aside. It really hasn't done its job. Where has ECOWAS produced even one regional plan, economic plan that's serious? No, they have become a security institution, not an economic institution. Got to have faith in oneself, got to have faith in one's ideas, got to build a plan that emancipates your own people. That's the main thing. And I'm the exact opposite of a xenophobe. I believe that economic emancipation and cultural emancipation go side by side, that people turn on each other out of frustration more than anything else. And if you can ease their frustration, it may be idealistic, but I believe that under everything, my God, there's some fantastic personalities in humanity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And a big thank you to Kwame Kwesi Pratt for bringing you onto the show today. The invitation came from him to you. You came to visit him, and then he decided to convince you to join us on the platform.
He convinced me, dragooned me. People may not know the word dragooned, but he dragooned me.
And then it's been worked well. It's been worked well listening to you. Thank you. The interesting thing is that the very first time I heard Kwame Kwesi Pratt Jr., I was convinced that that's how a professor should sound. To me, that was how a professor was supposed to sound. Then they said that he's not a professor. I said that, really? Okay. Because it's always surprising to me, the depth, the way he talks about things. And it's nice to listen to you, Prof. Professor Vijay Prashad is a distinguished academic. I'm not sure he likes being called a distinguished academic. He likes being called a journalist. And, of course, a historian. He's an author of many books, 14 total. He's a Marxist activist. And of course, he is also serves as the advisory council of the International People's Assembly. He's in Ghana, like I said, on the invitation of Socialist Movement of Ghana, and we had the pleasure of having him on the show today. A big thank you to Kwame Kwesi Jr. as always. He is the General Secretary of the Socialist Movement of Ghana, and a big thank you to Ninoy Hansen Norte and Solomon Owusu, who is the Director of Communications of the United Party. Now, these two men that you see here sitting beside Kwame Kwesi have been quite a discovery for Alhaji. Maybe quite discoveries for Alhaji and Alhaji. I remember the tussle with Solo and everything, and the back and forth and everything. And one of the things you learn on Alhaji and Alhaji is that these conversations actually grow you over time. The way we structure our conversations and the need for you to think through what you're coming to say. Because then I will not ask you any question. I won't mind you. Yeah, so you're on your own. Say whatever you want to say.
You have to be
your own.
I'm quite interested. I mean, we did a very short trip. Within about 2 years, I'm amazed at the superstar status that Solo has gained.
I've learned it from you.
Today, every radio station
Yes.
Solo.
Yes.
Every
time there's a video. There's a video of him training on one platform or the other. Every week is a constant feature. So I'm always happy that whenever we invite you, the tendency of most politicians in our country is that when they have used a platform to grow to a particular point, they refuse to come. They sometimes don't see a platform as big enough for them anymore. But it's always nice that anytime I reach out to Solo, he is always here. In fact, he himself tells you, this week I am the one who is coming. So he will be here always. And Ninoy, nowadays, he makes himself available to us. I know it's not easy, but it's nice to see you on the platform always.
But we insist.
Yes. We insist that.
We insist. There's no excuse.
Yes. And of course, okay, so first, let me say a good morning to Bishop Mantain Jasekan. He's a regular listener to this show. And of course, to another regular listener, he told me to at least use the platform to acknowledge this. Harry Hammond works with the prison service. He's been promoted to the rank of Deputy Director of Prisons. So congratulations to you. Very big congratulations to Harry Hammond.
But Sena, just before you run down, it was on this show that one of those who listens and watches the show regularly promised to give you some outfits.
Okay.
Remember?
Yes.
And then 2 or 3 weeks ago, Sena presented me with this outfit.
Bravo! I didn't understand.
Please, thank you very much.
Yeah. So nice.
Never met you before, but thank you so much.
Solo has met you.
And I wore this in Shanghai.
Okay.
And everybody said
so nice.
It was so beautiful.
Oh, yes.
Beautiful.
So nice.
So nice.
And then I came to Accra, and last week I attempted to wear it. And my wife said, no, you're not wearing this. It is too elegant.
Too elegant for you.
Thank you very much.
That's lovely. Too elegant. Well, let's okay. So let's conclude today's show by also extending our condolences to Sami Jemfi, who is the, of course, now Chief Executive of the Ghana Gold Board, and to the wife. His in-law, father-in-law, will be buried next week. Next week in Kumasi, Mr. Andrews Kwame Amankwa. So our condolences to you. Well, we'll see you same time next week with another edition of Alhaji and Alhaji, the mother of all talk shows. Let's say a big thank you to our partner stations across the country, and a big thank you to you who watched, listened to us, and those who contributed to the discussion. You always enrich it. And of course to the production team led by Tijani Badamasi and assisted by Latifa Adams, TT, and of course, I've forgotten the other name. Everybody calls her Sewa. So Ruben, who is in charge of research. A big thank you to all of you. Yes, Sewa, the director. So we'll see you same time next week. I am Sena Nombo.
He has labored, he has suffered to lead his people into the land of freedom. He is the Redeemer. He has labored,
truly African.